Welcome to another story on Cheating Tales Lab. We're so happy to have you here, and today's story is one we think you'll really enjoy. So without further ado, let's begin. Ethan Reeves guided his beat-up pickup into the driveway of his modest suburban home, a rare smile playing on his oil-stained face. The skilled diesel mechanic had managed to wrangle an early release from Big Rig Revival, determined to surprise his wife Olivia on Valentine's Day. He killed the engine, grabbed a small bouquet of carnations from the passenger seat, and stepped out into the crisp February air. As he approached the house, an unfamiliar sound stopped him in his tracks. Laughter, deep and masculine, mingled with the melodic tones of Olivia's voice. Ethan's brow furrowed. They weren't expecting company, were they? He hesitated at the front door, key in hand. Something felt off. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up, just like they did when he sensed a problem with an engine that wasn't immediately apparent. Shaking off the feeling, Ethan turned the key and stepped inside. The laughter grew louder, emanating from the living room. He rounded the corner and froze. Olivia, his wife of 12 years, was wrapped in the arms of a man Ethan had never seen before. The stranger was tall, clean-cut, and wearing an expensive-looking suit that made Ethan acutely aware of the grease stains on his own work clothes. In the man's free hand was an extravagant bouquet of exotic flowers that made Ethan's carnations look like weeds. The couple broke apart at Ethan's entrance, but the stranger didn't let go of Olivia. Instead, he fixed Ethan with a confident smirk and said, "You must be the husband. I'm Dr. Cameron Vance." Ethan's mind reeled. Dr. Vance. The name was vaguely familiar. The new pediatrician at Olivia's hospital. He'd heard her mention him in passing, but never like this. Before Ethan could form a response, Cameron turned back to Olivia. He presented her with the elaborate bouquet and planted a passionate kiss on her lips. "Pack your bags, darling," he declared. "It's time to leave this dead-end life behind." Ethan felt like he'd been sucker-punched. He looked to Olivia, waiting for her to deny it, to push this arrogant doctor away. But she didn't. Instead, she met Ethan's gaze head-on, her blue eyes devoid of the warmth they once held for him. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady, "Cameron and I, we've been seeing each other for 3 years now, since he started at the hospital." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. 3 years, half of their marriage, tainted by lies. In a moment of shocked anger, Ethan found his voice. "If you walk out that door with him, Olivia, we're done. 12 years of marriage gone. There's no coming back from this." Olivia hesitated, her eyes flickering between Ethan and Cameron. For a brief moment, Ethan thought she might reconsider. But then she squared her shoulders, grabbed her purse, and walked towards the door. "I'll be back for my things," she said, not meeting Ethan's eyes. And just like that, she was gone, leaving Ethan standing alone in their once shared home, a bouquet of wilting carnations clutched in his trembling hand. The weeks following Olivia's departure blurred together for Ethan. He moved through his days in a haze of anger and depression, barely registering the world around him. His work at Big Rig Revival suffered as a result. One particularly bad day, after Ethan had botched a simple oil change, his boss Gina Ortiz pulled him aside. Her usually stern face was etched with concern. "Ethan, what's going on with you?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. "You've been off your game for weeks now. I hate to do this, but I've got to give you an ultimatum. You've got 4 weeks to get your act together, or I'll have to let you go. We can't afford mistakes in this business." Ethan nodded numbly, knowing he should feel more concerned about potentially losing his job. But the threat of unemployment felt distant compared to the constant ache in his chest. That evening, hoping to drown his sorrows in a greasy burger, Ethan found himself at the local diner. As he waited for his order, he overheard a snippet of conversation from the booth behind him. "Can you believe Olivia finally left that grease monkey husband of hers? About time, if you ask me. She and Dr. Vance have been the worst-kept secret at the hospital for years." Ethan's hand clenched around his water glass. The worst-kept secret. Everyone had known except him. He'd been the town fool, oblivious to his wife's infidelity, while the rest of their social circle whispered and laughed behind his back. Abandoning his uneaten meal, Ethan drove to the bank, a new thought nagging at him. When he checked their joint account, his suspicions were confirmed. The $50,000 they'd painstakingly saved over the years gone, withdrawn by Olivia the day after she'd left. Financially strained and emotionally drained, Ethan found himself on the doorstep of his childhood friend, Ray Daniels. Ray, now a therapist, listened patiently as Ethan poured out his story. "I know it hurts, man," Ray said when Ethan finished, "but you've got to move on. Olivia made her choice. Don't let her destroy you." But even as Ethan nodded in agreement, he felt something shift inside him. The pain that had been consuming him began to harden, transforming into a thirst for retribution. Olivia and Cameron had humiliated him, betrayed him, stolen from him. They couldn't be allowed to get away with it. As Ethan left Ray's office, his mind was already working, plotting how he could make them pay. Weeks passed, and Ethan found himself working late at Big Rig Revival, trying to make up for his earlier mistakes and keep his job. As he tinkered with a particularly stubborn engine, he overheard two truckers talking in low voices near the office. "Heard the Road Reapers are having trouble with their runs." One of them was saying, "Increased police patrols are making it hard for them to move their stuff across state lines." Ethan's ears perked up. He'd heard of the Road Reapers before, a notorious biker gang known for trafficking illegal substances. Not the kind of crowd he'd ever associated with before. The other trucker snorted. "Serves them right, but they'll find a way around it. They always do." As the truckers moved away, Ethan's mind raced. An idea was forming, a dangerous, reckless idea that went against everything he'd ever believed in. But the thought of Olivia and Cameron, living it up with his hard-earned money while he struggled to keep his job, made his blood boil. He knew it was wrong. He knew it was illegal. But the desire for revenge overwhelmed his better judgment. Over the next few days, Ethan did his research. He learned everything he could about the Road Reapers, their operations, and their vehicles. Then, steeling his nerves, he made his way to a seedy bar on the outskirts of town, known to be a hangout for the gang. The bar was dimly lit and smelled of stale beer and cigarettes. Ethan felt woefully out of place in his work jeans and flannel shirt, surrounded by leather-clad bikers. But he spotted his target, Axel Krieger, the Road Reapers leader, at a corner table and approached with feigned confidence. "Axel Krieger?" Ethan said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I've got a proposition for you." Axel, a mountain of a man with a bushy beard and arms covered in tattoos, looked up at Ethan with amusement. "And who might you be, little man?" Ethan swallowed hard but pressed on. "I'm a mechanic, a damn good one. I heard you've been having trouble with your transportation. I can help. I can modify your bikes, make them faster, stealthier, add hidden compartments that no cop would ever find." Axel's eyes narrowed. "And why would a straight-laced mechanic want to get mixed up with us?" "Let's just say I've got my reasons," Ethan replied, thinking of Olivia and Cameron. "You don't need to know them. All you need to know is that I can help you stay ahead of the law." Axel studied Ethan for a long moment, then barked out a laugh. "You've got balls. I'll give you that. All right, we'll give you a trial run. One bike. If you can do what you say, maybe we'll talk more." Ethan nodded, relief and trepidation warring inside him. As he left the bar, he realized he'd just taken his first step down a very dark path. But the thought of Olivia and Cameron's shocked faces when their perfect new life came crashing down around them steeled his resolve. He'd show them what happened when you betrayed Ethan Reeves, and the Road Reapers were going to help him do it. Ethan Reeves sat in the dim light of his basement, the glow of his laptop screen illuminating his face. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he contemplated his next move. The past few weeks working with the Road Reapers had given him access to resources he'd never imagined. Now, it was time to put them to use. He opened a new email account, one that couldn't be traced back to him. The message he composed was brief but damning. To the hospital board, I am writing to express grave concerns about the professional conduct of Dr. Cameron Vance and Nurse Olivia Reeves. Their inappropriate relationship has become a liability to patient care. Ethan's finger lingered over the send button. A small voice in the back of his mind whispered that this was wrong, that he was crossing a line. But then he remembered Olivia's cold eyes as she walked out on their marriage, and Cameron's smug smile. His jaw clenched, and he hit send. But that was just the beginning. Ethan knew that to truly devastate them professionally, he needed more. His time with the Road Reapers had taught him that everyone had secrets, and those secrets could be weaponized. Using the skills he'd picked up from the gang's tech guy, Ethan managed to access the hospital's pharmacy records. It took him hours of painstaking work, but eventually he was able to manipulate the data. To anyone looking closely, it would appear that Olivia had been falsifying prescriptions for painkillers. As he worked, Ethan couldn't help but think about how Olivia had always been so proud of her nursing career. She'd worked hard to get where she was, putting herself through school while he worked extra shifts at the garage to make ends meet. Now, he was systematically destroying everything she'd built. The thought should have made him feel guilty, but all he felt was a cold satisfaction. The final piece of his plan required a bit more hands-on involvement. Ethan reached out to his contact in the Road Reapers, a wiry man named Spike who always seemed to be vibrating with nervous energy. I need something, Ethan said when they met in a deserted parking lot. Just a small amount, enough to ruin someone. Spike eyed him warily. This ain't for personal use, is it? 'Cause Axel won't like that. Ethan shook his head. It's for a job. That's all you need to know. Spike hesitated, then shrugged. He pulled out a small baggie filled with white powder. Your funeral, man. With the final piece in place, Ethan put his plan into motion. He knew Cameron's schedule, knew when he'd be at the hospital. It was almost too easy to plant the drugs in the doctor's car. Then came another anonymous tip, this time to the police. There's a doctor at Memorial Hospital dealing drugs from his car. His name is Cameron Vance. Ethan watched from across the street as the police pulled Cameron over on his way home from work. He saw the confusion on Cameron's face turn to shock as the officers found the planted drugs. As they cuffed him and put him in the back of the patrol car, Ethan felt a surge of triumph. The next day, the hospital was in chaos. Both Olivia and Cameron had been suspended pending investigation. Rumors flew about drug dealing and falsified prescriptions. Ethan observed it all from a distance, his face a mask of concerned confusion whenever anyone at Big Rig Revival mentioned the scandal. As he drove home that evening, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. Phase 1 of his revenge was complete, but he was far from done. Ethan knew that to truly destroy Olivia and Cameron, he needed to hit them where it would hurt the most, their wallets. But for this, he needed help beyond what the Road Reapers could provide. Through his connections with the gang, Ethan was put in touch with a hacker known only as Ghost. They met in a nondescript coffee shop, Ghost's face hidden behind the glow of a laptop screen. I need access to some email accounts and financial records, Ethan said, sliding a piece of paper across the table with Olivia and Cameron's information. Ghost raised an eyebrow. That's some personal stuff you're after. Sure you want to go down this road? Ethan's face hardened. They went down this road when they decided to destroy my life. I'm just returning the favor. Ghost shrugged and got to work. Within hours, Ethan had full access to Olivia and Cameron's email accounts and financial records. What he saw made his blood boil. They had been planning their new life together for months, discussing investments and future plans with his money. With Ghost's help, Ethan began to systematically dismantle their financial lives. He emptied their personal accounts and investment portfolios, carefully making the transactions appear as if Olivia and Cameron were involved in a complex money laundering scheme. As he worked, Ethan couldn't help but think about the life he and Olivia had planned together. They were supposed to grow old in that modest suburban house, maybe have a couple of kids. Now, he was ensuring they wouldn't even be able to rent a decent apartment. Next came their credit histories. Ghost showed Ethan how to manipulate the data, tanking their credit scores to the point where they wouldn't be able to get a loan for a candy bar, let alone a house or car. The final touch was an anonymous report to the IRS, complete with falsified evidence of hidden income. Ethan knew from his own tax troubles years ago how ruthless the IRS could be. He almost felt sorry for what was coming their way. Almost. As the days passed, Ethan watched from afar as Olivia and Cameron's world crumbled around them. He saw them arguing outside the hospital, saw the stress and fear etched on their faces as they were turned away from banks and real estate offices. One evening, as Ethan was leaving Big Rig Revival, he overheard two nurses gossiping by their cars. "Did you hear about Olivia and that doctor she ran off with?" One said. "Apparently, they're under investigation for money laundering or something. All their accounts are frozen." "Serves them right," the other replied. "Karma's a bitch." Ethan allowed himself a small smirk as he got into his truck. Karma indeed. Ethan was elbow deep in the engine of a semi when he heard the commotion. Angry voices echoed through the garage, growing louder as they approached. He recognized them immediately and felt a mix of anticipation and dread coil in his stomach. "Where is he?" Cameron's voice boomed. "Where's that bastard Ethan?" Ethan slowly extracted himself from the engine, wiping his hands on a rag as he turned to face the approaching storm. Olivia and Cameron stood before him, their once polished appearances now ragged and desperate. Olivia's eyes, once cold when she left him, now burned with a mixture of anger and pleading. "Ethan, what have you done?" Ethan kept his face carefully neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about, Olivia. I've been here, doing my job." Cameron surged forward, his face red with rage. "Don't play dumb, you grease monkey. Our lives are in ruins, and I know you're behind it somehow." Ethan raised an eyebrow, his voice calm despite the hammering of his heart. "Sounds like you've had a rough time, but I fail to see how that's my problem. You made your choices." "Choices?" Olivia's voice cracked. "Ethan, we're being investigated by the IRS. The hospital board is talking about revoking our licenses. We can't even get a credit card. This goes way beyond our mistake." Ethan felt a flicker of satisfaction at her use of the word mistake, but he squashed it down. "That sounds awful," he said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "But again, I don't see what it has to do with me. I'm just a mechanic, remember?" Cameron's control snapped. With a roar of frustration, he lunged at Ethan, grabbing him by the front of his coveralls. "You smug son of a—" But before he could finish, a new voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" Ethan looked over Cameron's shoulder to see Axel and two other road reapers standing at the entrance to the garage. They must have come for their weekly vehicle checkup. Cameron, oblivious to the danger, sneered at the newcomers. "This doesn't concern you. This is between me and this lying piece of—" Axel stepped forward, his massive frame dwarfing Cameron. "I think you'll find it does concern us. Ethan here is under our protection, so I suggest you take your hands off him. Now." The color drained from Cameron's face as he realized the situation he was in. He released Ethan and stepped back, pulling Olivia behind him protectively. The tense standoff was broken by the sudden wail of police sirens. Ethan's eyes widened in genuine surprise. He hadn't planned this. Gina's voice called out from the office. "I hit the silent alarm when I saw the confrontation. The police are on their way." Panic flashed across Cameron's face. Ethan watched as he surreptitiously reached into his pocket, presumably to dispose of any remaining evidence from his arrest. But he wasn't fast enough. Two police officers burst into the garage, hands on their weapons. "What's going on here?" One of the officers recognized Cameron. "Dr. Vance? Didn't we just arrest you last week?" Before Cameron could respond, the officer noticed his suspicious movement. "Sir, please remove your hand from your pocket slowly." Cameron complied, his face ashen. The officer approached and reached into Cameron's pocket, pulling out a small bag with trace amounts of white powder. "Well, well, the officer said, his voice hard. "Looks like we've got ourselves a repeat offender." As the officers cuffed Cameron and read him his rights, Ethan caught Olivia's eye. The look she gave him was one of dawning realization and horror. She knew. She finally understood the extent of what he'd done. Ethan maintained his innocent facade, but inside, he felt a rush of dark triumph. As Cameron was led away and Olivia stood alone, her world crumbling around her, Ethan allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. The Road Reapers melted away as the police took statements, leaving Ethan to spin a tale of being unfairly confronted by his ex-wife and her unstable boyfriend. Gina backed up his story, and soon, the garage was quiet once more. As Ethan returned to the engine he'd been working on, he realized that his revenge was complete. Olivia and Cameron's professional lives were in shambles. Their finances were ruined, and now Cameron was facing serious criminal charges. But as the adrenaline of the confrontation faded, Ethan felt an unexpected emptiness. He picked up his wrench and dove back into his work. He couldn't shake the feeling that this victory might be more dangerous than he'd anticipated. Ethan Reeves stepped out of his apartment building. The cool morning air a welcome respite from the stuffy interior. He'd been lying low since the confrontation at Big Rig Revival, taking some time off work to avoid suspicion. As he walked to his truck, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The street was quiet, too quiet for a weekday morning. Ethan's eyes darted from side to side, his newfound paranoia making every shadow seem threatening. He was reaching for his truck door when he heard it, the low rumble of motorcycles approaching fast. Ethan's heart rate spiked. This wasn't the familiar sound of the Road Reapers' bikes. These engines were different, angrier somehow. He turned just in time to see a group of motorcycles round the corner, their riders clad in leather jackets emblazoned with a coiled viper. The Steel Vipers. Ethan had heard whispers about them from the Road Reapers. They were rivals, constantly fighting over territory and drug routes. But what were they doing here? Ethan didn't have time to ponder the question. The lead rider raised his arm, and Ethan caught the glint of sunlight on metal. His body reacted before his mind could process what was happening. He dove behind his truck just as the first shots rang out. The sound of gunfire filled the air, accompanied by the shattering of glass and the ping of bullets hitting metal. Ethan's truck rocked with the impact of multiple rounds. He curled into a ball, hands over his head, praying for it to end. As quickly as it had started, the attack was over. The roar of motorcycles faded into the distance, leaving behind a ringing silence punctuated by car alarms and distant screams. Ethan cautiously raised his head. His truck was riddled with bullet holes, the windows shattered. Across the street, he saw his neighbors peeking out from behind curtains, their faces pale with shock. With shaking hands, Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed 911. As he waited for the operator to pick up, the reality of what had just happened hit him like a physical blow. The Steel Vipers had targeted him. They must believe he was a key player in the Road Reapers operation. His revenge plot against Olivia and Cameron had spiraled far beyond his control. He was no longer just playing at being a criminal. He was in the middle of a gang war, and he had just become a primary target. As sirens wailed in the distance, Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't go to the police. That would mean admitting to his involvement with the Road Reapers. But he couldn't just sit back and wait for the next attack either. He needed a plan, a way to extricate himself from this mess before it got him killed. As he gave his statement to the responding officers, carefully omitting any mention of his connection to the Road Reapers, an idea began to form. If he was caught in the middle of a gang war, maybe he could use that to his advantage, play both sides against each other, and come out clean on the other side. It was risky, potentially suicidal even. But as Ethan looked at the bullet-riddled remains of his truck, he realized he was out of options. He was going to have to outsmart two of the most dangerous gangs in the state, and he was going to have to do it fast. Ethan sat in a dingy motel room, his laptop open before him. He'd been here for days, using the skills he'd picked up from Ghost to create a web of false information. It was time to set his plan in motion. First, He fabricated evidence suggesting that the Road Reapers were planning to hijack the Steel Viper's next major shipment. He planted this information in places he knew the Vipers would find it: encrypted messages on dark web forums, whispers in the right ears at seedy bars. Then he did the same for the Road Reapers, creating a mirror image of the plot, but with the Vipers as the would-be hijackers. He made sure to use different methods, different styles of communication. It had to look like two separate plans, not one person playing puppet master. As he worked, Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how far he'd come. From a simple mechanic to a man orchestrating a showdown between two notorious gangs. He wondered what Olivia would think if she could see him now. Would she be impressed, horrified, or would she just see the same grease monkey she'd left behind? With the bait set, Ethan moved on to the next phase of his plan. He created an anonymous email account and composed a message to both gangs. A major shipment of product is coming through your territory next week. Details enclosed. This is your chance to take out your rivals once and for all. He attached the fabricated details of the fictional shipment, making sure the information was vague enough to be believable but specific enough to ensure both gangs would converge at the same place and time. Ethan's finger hovered over the send button. Once he did this, there would be no going back. He thought about Olivia, about Cameron, about how this had all started with a simple desire for revenge. Now, he was about to potentially cause a bloodbath. But then he remembered the drive-by shooting, the terror he'd felt as bullets whizzed past his head. It was them or him now. He hit send. With the gangs primed for conflict, Ethan turned his attention to law enforcement. He couldn't go to the local police. Too risky. But he knew from his time with the Road Reapers that there was a DEA task force in the area, one that had been trying to bring down both gangs for years. Using another anonymous email account, Ethan reached out to the DEA. He provided detailed information about both gangs' operations, information he'd gleaned during his time with the Road Reapers and through his own investigations. And most importantly, he gave him the time and location of the impending gang confrontation. As he sent the final email, Ethan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd done all he could. Now, he just had to wait and hope his plan worked. The night of the supposed shipment arrived. Ethan watched from a safe distance as vehicles belonging to both gangs converged on the abandoned warehouse he'd specified in his tips. He could see the tension in the air, the way both sides moved with wary aggression. Just as the first shots were fired, a fleet of unmarked vehicles swarmed the area. DEA agents poured out, weapons drawn. The resulting chaos was beyond anything Ethan had imagined. Gunfire erupted from all sides as gang members tried to flee or fight back. Ethan watched, his heart pounding, as dozens of gang members were arrested. He recognized Axel among those being led away in handcuffs. The man who had once terrified him now looked small and defeated. As the dust settled, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. His plan had worked. Both the Road Reapers and the Steel Vipers had been effectively dismantled in one fell swoop. His connection to the underworld was severed. But as he turned to leave, Ethan realized something that wiped the smile from his face. Yes, he was free from the gang's influence, but he was also without their protection, and he had just made a lot of dangerous enemies. The weeks following the gang bust were tense for Ethan. He half expected the police to show up at his door at any moment, to reveal that they'd discovered his role in the whole affair. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, he began to relax. It was a crisp fall morning when there was finally a knock at his door. Ethan's heart leaped into his throat, but when he opened it, he found not the police, but a pair of DEA agents. "Mr. Reeves," one of them said, "we'd like to ask you a few questions about the recent gang activity in the area." Ethan's palms began to sweat, but he nodded and invited them in. For the next hour, he answered their questions as vaguely as possible, sticking to half-truths and carefully constructed lies. To his surprise, the agent seemed less interested in interrogating him and more in thanking him. "Mr. Reeves," the lead agent said as they were preparing to leave, We want you to know that the information you provided was instrumental in bringing down two of the most dangerous gangs in the state. Ethan blinked, confused. I'm sorry, what information? The agent smiled knowingly. Come now, Mr. Reeves. We're well aware that you were the anonymous tipster who led us to the warehouse that night. Your detailed knowledge of both gangs' operations was invaluable. Ethan's mind raced. They thought he was some kind of upstanding citizen informant, not a man out for revenge who had gotten in way over his head. We'd like to offer you a commendation for your service, the agent continued. It'll be private, of course. We understand the need for discretion in these matters. As the agents left, Ethan stood in his doorway, stunned. He had gone from a man on the verge of losing everything to a celebrated informant in the eyes of law enforcement. The irony was almost too much to bear. Weeks passed, and life began to return to normal. Ethan went back to work at Big Rig Revival. His newfound status as a community hero, the story had leaked, despite the DA's promises of discretion, earning him a promotion from Gina. It was on a quiet Sunday afternoon that Ethan's past came knocking once again. He opened his door to find Olivia standing there, looking pale and drawn. Ethan, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk? He let her in, more out of shock than any desire to hear what she had to say. Olivia sat on his couch, wringing her hands. I've made a terrible mistake, Ethan, she said, tears welling in her eyes. Cameron, he's in prison. Our lives are ruined. I see now how foolish I was to throw away what we had. Ethan listened silently as Olivia poured out her heart, begging for forgiveness, asking for another chance. A part of him, the part that still remembered the happy years of their marriage, wanted to take her in his arms and tell her all was forgiven. But as he looked at her, all he could see was a woman who had walked out on him, who had drained their savings and left him with nothing but a thirst for revenge that had nearly gotten him killed. I'm sorry, Olivia, he said, his voice gentle but firm, but that chapter of our lives is over. I've moved on. I think you should too. The look of devastation on Olivia's face as she left was something Ethan knew would stay with him for a long time. But as he closed the door behind her, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in months. With his newfound reputation and the modest reward money from the DEA, Ethan was able to secure a loan to start his own business. He called it Reeves Custom Rigs, a specialty truck modification shop that would allow him to put his skills to use on his own terms. On the day of the grand opening, Ethan stood outside his new shop, surrounded by friends and well-wishers. Gina was there, beaming with pride at her former employee. Even Ray had shown up, clearly relieved to see Ethan looking happy and healthy. As he cut the ribbon to officially open Reeves Custom Rigs, Ethan felt a sense of optimism he hadn't experienced in years. He had walked through fire, made mistakes, and nearly lost everything. But he had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and ready for a fresh start. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, Ethan Reeves was looking forward to the journey. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.
Let's start with D-Day in the spring of 2017, when my wife and I were around 30 years old and had been together since our college days. We also had a child in elementary school. Initially, I suspected my wife of having an affair, but when I expressed my concerns, she immediately denied it. Over time, my fears were confirmed, and I confronted her with evidence. Despite her persistent denial, she eventually confessed, crying and asking for forgiveness. At that point, I felt like demanding her immediate departure and starting the divorce process. It's crucial to share how the events leading to the revelation of her infidelity unfolded. Even though it didn't involve physical closeness, plans for an faithful meeting were already in place. A few months before that crucial day, I noticed my wife using her phone more cautiously. She would turn away when using it and quickly put it away when I entered the room. She even took it to the bath or shower, which seemed strange, but I didn't think much of it at first. One incident caught my attention. We used to freely share our phones, but the day I wanted her number to find a new restaurant, something seemed off. I suggested going to a new restaurant, but my phone was charging. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked for her phone number. When she asked why, I explained, but she held onto her phone while showing me the menu. This, along with other behaviors, raised my suspicions. After pondering for days, I finally asked her directly if something was going on with someone else. She reassured me, citing a friend's personal issue and the need for privacy. Despite her reassurances, an uneasy feeling persisted. Despite my efforts, the discomfort lingered, suggesting more to the situation. The suspicious behavior appeared to stop, or so I thought. Then a significant incident occurred, further confirming my suspicions. Approaching this delicately, one afternoon during an unfaithful moment, she reached for her phone, expressing a desire to record the process on video. This was unusual as she usually felt insecure around cameras. Curiosity got the better of me, and I asked about the purpose. A little embarrassed, she said she wanted to observe herself. Seeing this new adventurous side, I agreed. She set up a camera, filming herself on a selfie camera, capturing every detail of her intense engagement. I was pleasantly surprised by her active participation, as she usually did this only at my request. But this time she readily agreed without taking her eyes off the camera, radiating captivating enthusiasm. The handsome sounds she made added to the intensity of the situation and captivated me. When the performance reached its peak, she went further, showcasing the achievement in front of the camera. I regret acknowledging the future importance of this video, but it's definitely significant. Despite the clear deviation from our usual behavior, I chose not to make a big deal out of it, not wanting to embarrass or discourage her from trying new things. Instead, I tried to keep things normal, secretly hoping we could explore this new experience together. Since my wife and I have been in a committed relationship since age 20, her sudden change in character triggered a familiar, instinctive feeling in me. A few weeks after the video incident, I decided to check her phone for suspicious messages or photos, but found nothing unusual. Later, I remembered we used the backup function together, saving pictures automatically to Google Photos. Realizing this, I logged into my laptop, using her credentials for further investigation. When checking her email, everything seemed normal until I found a large collection of candid photos and videos taken by her about 4 months ago. They weren't meant for me, and she had deleted them from her phone, but forgot to delete them from the backup. Curiosity got the best of me, and I decided to continue searching by opening the video camera on her phone and scrolling through the discovered content before talking to her. I chose to rewrite this material in case she remembers and erases it. I kept this information for several days, trying to handle it with understanding and considering possible explanations for its presence. At that time, OnlyFans wasn't popular, so I initially thought she might post explicit materials online, but that would be out of character for her. I emphasized that she's always been reserved. I couldn't imagine how this could be explained other than a romantic relationship with someone else. Again, I expressed my suspicions to her, mentioning something was off, but refrained from revealing the facts I discovered, hoping for an explanation that would dispel my doubts. In response, she seemed slightly offended, reminding us that we already discussed this issue and denying any relationship with another man. There was no admission of guilt. I asked her again if she needed to share something or speak out, and again she refused. Before this conversation, I got access to her Google account again, so I presented her with all the information I gathered and demanded an explanation about the contents of her Google account. Her initial reaction was surprised, but she quickly composed herself. She accused me of ruining an unexpected anniversary gift she had planned for me. Knowing that we both travel a lot, she wanted to give me something interesting for our time apart, but I remained skeptical and decided to play a bluff. I told her I had access not only to her Google account, hoping this would make her confess the truth on my ultimatum to leave if she didn't. She couldn't hold back her tears and insisted everything was not as it seemed. Apologizing, she asked for forgiveness. She claimed she did nothing wrong, but only acted stupidly. When I asked about the person she mentioned, she called him her colleague. They first met at a work event at the end of 2016, about 7 months before this important event. Interestingly, he holds a similar position in another branch of the same company, located about 200 miles away from us. Initially, they communicated by email, mainly about work. After exchanging numbers, she emphasized that, given his extensive experience in this position, her only intention was to get professional advice and share tips. It was her recent promotion to a similar position that triggered more personal topics in their conversation, and he began to flirt, to which she willingly reciprocated. Realizing the need for privacy, he suggested moving their communication to an encrypted messaging app. From my perspective, this man seemed to have a tendency to pursue married women, which was unpleasant to me. The initial messages were deleted, so I never saw them, but the rest of their conversation was saved in the messaging app they used. When I said I wanted to watch, she resisted and tried to talk me out of it emotionally. At the same time, I reminded her that I was ready to leave if she wasn't completely honest with me. Eventually, she reluctantly opened the app and handed it to me, curling up with her head in her lap. The content of the messages was explicit, filled with provocative photos and videos. Both participants were excited about an upcoming summer work event where they planned to spend 2 nights in a hotel, detailing shockingly graphic messages about what they intended to do. Continuing to read, my thoughts went back to the earlier video. I asked if she had sent him the video, and in response, she burst into tears. Trying to gather more information, I scrolled through the conversation until I found a video. To my horror, they were exchanging numerous notes discussing him. He expressed pleasure from indulging in pleasure while watching the video, and she replied that it turns her on. This revelation deeply offended me. It wasn't just about sharing a faithful video, but also emotional betrayal. Participating in such a vulnerable action was completely unfamiliar to me. Let me clarify that I've never shared explicit photos, let alone sent them. The idea of sharing such an unfaithful picture, especially with someone she was involved with, terrified me. However, they managed to involve me in their past relationships, even though I never willingly participated. Maybe not intentionally, but it seemed so. Now, thinking about it, I realize with deep regret that I was just her replacement and an equal participant in that video. I realized that all those worries and experiences I expected were directed solely for his benefit, not mine. So I made the difficult decision to leave and informed her about my desire to divorce. Despite her moving out, she insisted on reconciling. To get a grip on the situation, I consulted with several divorce lawyers who informed me that a settlement agreement would inevitably lead to a significant decrease in my financial well-being and joint custody of our child. After carefully studying my financial capabilities and having numerous conversations with my parents, I came to this conclusion. Turning to my colleague for advice and trusting my friends, I concluded that divorce is the most appropriate option. I believed that I could overcome financial difficulties reasonably soon, allowing me to retire as planned. Additionally, I believed that my daughter's well-being would be better if she had contented parents, even if they were no longer married. When I finally reached out to my wife to tell her about my decision to start divorce proceedings, she surprised me by offering a deal. She suggested a year-long trial separation, during which we would have time to cool down and restore the relationship. After seeking advice from a marriage counselor, I reconsidered the situation. If I chose to move on, the consultant would be ready to facilitate the divorce process, providing equal custody of the child and a more favorable distribution of property. After careful consideration, I agreed to this decision. I made it clear to my wife that I intended to approach our separation as if I were single. Given the length of our relationship and my limited experience when we first started dating, I felt that I needed to gain more life experience to make an informed decision about our future. I expressed my dissatisfaction with her behavior and made it clear that if she considered it unfair or felt uncomfortable in such an unequal position, then we could think about divorce. Although it was unpleasant for her, she understood my point of view and eventually agreed. Soon after, I started dating other women, including a romantic relationship with a woman I met at the gym that lasted several months. It seems that my wife doubted the sincerity of our relationship. She didn't handle the situation properly. During our first marriage consultation, we introduced ourselves and discussed our circumstances. The marriage counselor asked about my dating status, to which I replied affirmatively. In response, My wife made the following remark: "I don't see the point in us going through this if you're dating other women." After the session, I agreed with her opinion and expressed the belief that marriage counseling might not be a useful idea. She subsequently apologized and retracted her words. I told her we could revisit the idea later. Over the next few months, she periodically, often late at night, sent me messages asking why I had treated her this way and whether I had not punished her properly. After about a year and a half, I began to consider the possibility of reconciliation. We successfully engaged in co-parenting and spent time with our daughter as one family. Besides, the dates were incredibly dull. Perhaps it was premature, but disappointment overwhelmed me. After numerous dates and even second and third dates, I realized that I couldn't imagine anything more than casual relationships with the women I dated. As a result, having been divorced for more than a year, I decided to end my dating. This choice allowed me to spend more time reconnecting with my wife. In early 2019, I asked her to move in with us to rebuild our family, bringing great joy to my daughter. Our relationship restoration centered around our shared commitment to raising our child. As a mother, I trust her implicitly. She's excellent, and I have full confidence in her ability to make sensible financial and medical decisions on my behalf if needed. However, our romantic love hasn't rekindled, and unfortunately, I no longer feel a deep sense of gratitude for having her in my life. While some aspects of our relationship aren't ideal, it doesn't diminish my overall happiness. I've held on to hope for a long time, but it's been over 4 years since our reconciliation, and it seems things won't get much better. Nevertheless, I'm content fulfilling the roles of a responsible partner and devoted father daily. This used to suit me well, but recent events brought discord into our relationship, leaving me feeling depressed and lost after the betrayal. I'm really counting on the support of others. My best friend and I have been inseparable since our teenage years, attending all significant events together, from proms to weddings and even the birth of our children. Despite the busy life, we managed to find time for joint sports several times a week. During the tough times of separation from my wife, he provided support, checking on me daily and ensuring I took care of myself. He even monitored my drinks intake. I tried not to succumb to excessive drinking and to keep my composure until I regained stability in my life. But after I took over the organization of Thanksgiving last year, the situation began to change. He became distant, often canceled our classes at the gym, and generally avoided communication. At first, I attributed this behavior to being busy during the holiday season, given the family and work responsibilities that usually consume all of us at this time. From time to time, I contacted him by SMS to find out how he was doing, but his answers usually came down to short messages or a simple thumbs-up emoji. I didn't attach much importance to this. Perhaps he just needed personal space. I tried to communicate with him and convince him of my sincere care and support. But in January, my wife confronted me with the fact that I had not informed her about the divorce of my closest friend and his wife. I was completely unaware of the situation she was talking about. As it turned out, my friend's wife turned to my wife with a request to help her overcome infidelity and convince her of the need to work on their marriage. In response, my wife just offered her typical advice. She stressed the importance of qualities such as transparency, patience, and respect, and even advised me to read something. But I was struck by his reaction to someone else's situation. Despite the obvious irony in her answer, I refrained from expressing my thoughts. It was very sad for me to watch the pain they caused. Like everyone else, I knew about the difficulties they faced and could not understand why they did not turn to me for support. After all, this man gave me incredible support during my wife's infidelity, and I thought he should have known that I would never condemn him. Driven by my anxiety, I started reaching out to him, inviting him to the gym or for a drink, hoping to find solace. We were engaged, for example, in a game of disc golf, but it took a long time to persuade him. When we met, his attitude towards me was far from warm. He seemed terse and unfriendly, but as we talked, he gradually began to tell his story. He said that at some point, his wife told him that they should live separately, as I did. She even suggested that extramarital affairs are common in many marriages. His wife's disbelief in his fidelity led to the fact that he began to think about divorce. It was obvious that he partially blamed me for the current situation. The pain inflicted on me was as sharp as a blade. The mere thought that I had played some role, even the most insignificant, in the cruel fate of my friend's betrayal, caused almost as much pain as the discovery of my wife's infidelity. Did my decision to stay with my wife somehow affect this outcome? Does forgiving infidelity mean that it becomes more tolerable? Is there anything I can do to help my friend? I tried to explain why I decided to stay, emphasizing that our relationship had become purely practical. Our marriage no longer resembled what it was before. However, his indifference didn't confuse me. I believe he has every right to be angry, and I sympathize with him. The recent incident reopened old emotional wounds, significantly worsening my relationship with my wife. It's been 2 months since our last faithful moment, and even making eye contact or engaging in physical touch has become challenging for me. The thought of divorce has started crossing my mind again, but fortunately, my daughter is grown up now and can handle the potential consequences. I think she's reached an age where she can express her wishes and opinions about our family situation. I have complete confidence in my wife's ability to be a great co-parent, irrespective of our relationship status. I feel a strong sense of guilt and depression about how much we've regressed, and I'm somewhat disgusted by my own actions. Have any of you ever felt this overwhelming sense of guilt, especially at such an advanced stage? How did you cope with it? Logically, I understand I'm not to blame, but his criticism puts a lot of pressure on my conscience. I can't support him the way he once supported me. I'm genuinely at a loss about what to do. Any advice or words of support would be greatly appreciated. I can't help but wonder if cheating has permanently damaged the part of me seeking connection and closeness. After our conversation, I felt emptiness and the absence of any real essence. I remember lying in bed one weekend, contemplating the lack of emotions I should be feeling. Despite being with an amazing woman, experiencing a tender and charming moment, an inexplicable emptiness prevailed within me. I longed for the deep connection and closeness my wife and I once had, but it never surfaced. This inability to feel burdened me with guilt and deep self-doubt. When my wife and I reconciled, I hoped to regain the deep satisfaction and connection we once shared. Despite the physical aspect being enjoyable, there's no true satisfaction in it. It feels like I'm just going through the motions and not experiencing a genuine connection with my wife. Since I last expressed my concerns, there has been some improvement in our relationship. We've had several conversations, and I must commend my wife for her insight and intelligence in understanding what was bothering me. I questioned why she felt entitled to condemn my friend's wife for behaving similarly to herself. She adamantly denied the similarity, claiming Mike's wife had repeatedly cheated while she had never done so. It was clear she had convinced herself she never intended to cheat with a third person. I reminded her of our previous conversations, to which she replied something like this: "I made a big mistake and allowed myself to get carried away by the moment, even though I had no intention of doing anything. She just doesn't get it, or maybe I don't understand it. On one hand, I recognize our situation could have been worse, but on the other, the guilt still weighs on me. At least we're communicating now. Some people suggested psychotherapy, but we never went to marriage counseling after the first session. However, my wife attended individual therapy sessions during our separation. My family has faced challenges with mental health treatment, and my grandmother's mistreatment by mental health professionals during a less understanding era left a lasting impact on our perception. This has become a significant obstacle for me in seeking help for myself, and I'm unsure how to overcome it. Regarding Mike, I decided to give him the space, as you all recommended. I reached out to him through text, expressing my support, apologizing for his current difficulties, and assuring him of my presence and support. In response, he gave me a thumbs up, indicating he needed my help. I can't help but feel sorry for him and would like to offer support. I'm grateful to all of you for being an umbrella for me, because I can't share these things with anyone in my life. They either condemn me or condemn my wife, which isn't good for anyone. I would greatly appreciate any advice or words of support. On another note, tonight was an unexpected development. For the first time since the new year and the incident with Mike and his wife, after finishing work, she drank several glasses of wine. From the start, she exuded undeniable beauty that has always captivated me. Lately, my desire for physical release has been increasing rapidly. Complicating matters, her infidelity revealed that I'm not an integral part of her past life. Perhaps I'm just a preference, not an absolute necessity, meaning if I can't satisfy her desires, someone else undoubtedly will. There was no tenderness or closeness in this meeting, just dark, desperate, and even primal energy. As soon as she reached the end, the immediate desire was to take a shower, which I did. Unfortunately, her feelings were hurt, and they would have been hurt even more if I had rejected her. I'm not sure this outcome can be considered a victory for me. I apologize for clouding the mood, but I am deeply disappointed in myself and our situation now. Sharing my thoughts here brings me some comfort. Growing up, my father instilled in me that a man should silently cope with his problems and fulfill his duties, as no one cares about our emotional well-being. We are valued only for our usefulness. Perhaps it's not surprising he passed away at such a young age. After the incident I described, an awkward tension lingered in our family. To avoid this discomfort, I intentionally kept my presence to a minimum, thanks to my daily routine, including work and gym classes. Additionally, my daughter and I found solace in our shared passion for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, spending a significant amount of time together in the gym, where events were held every evening, on weekdays, and Sunday afternoons. In early February, news of my mother's sister's pass away reached us. She lived in a neighboring state and left behind cherished family photos, looms, and personal belongings important to my mother. Without hesitation, I offered to make the trip to pick up these valuable items. The agreement was made about 3 weeks ago, and my wayward wife and I were planning to make the trip together last weekend. On Friday, as we were getting ready for work, I reminded her of our plans for the Sunday trip and volunteered to go alone, despite the long journey of over 4 hours each way. Even though I assured her I could handle it, I brought up my past experience with such a trip. She expressed a desire to go, but I convinced her everything was fine and suggested she probably had more interesting ways to spend Sunday. Yet, she insisted on accompanying me and said she didn't mind coming along. I stressed that I wanted her to join me, but emphasized it was ultimately her decision whether to stay home or join the trip. In response, I made it clear I wanted her to come with me. I didn't want her to go, not because I didn't want her to, but because I understood it would be an unpleasant experience for her. So, on Sunday morning, I woke up early, ensuring my mother could take care of our daughter for the whole day. Once everything was settled, I returned home for my wife, ready to hit the road. The first hour of the ride passed in silence, as she had just woken up and doesn't like to talk in the morning. Eventually, we stopped for breakfast, refreshed ourselves with some coffee, and began a conversation mostly about our daughter and work. Then, the conversation took an unexpected turn. It was casual, consisting of small talk, and nothing extraordinary. Suddenly, she inquired about Mike's well-being. Not being aware of his current situation, I admitted my ignorance, which puzzled her, given our close friendship. I explained that I hadn't met with him since our last get-together for drinks a few months ago. Perplexed, she asked if there was any specific incident causing our separation. I clarified that it was simply both of us being busy with our lives, making communication difficult. Despite my efforts to shift the conversation, she refused to back down. She started criticizing me, stating that I didn't support a friend and expressing disappointment about my absence during his tough times. She insisted that his difficulties stemmed from his wife's infidelity and the upcoming divorce. Though I sensed tension rising, I managed to contain it. Instead, I calmly told her I no longer wanted to continue the conversation and drowned out her words by playing my music podcast. Deep down, I knew this conversation was unavoidable and had to happen. I've always been better at expressing my thoughts in writing than speaking off the cuff. To prepare for this conversation, I actively participated in online discussions, which proved helpful. Additionally, I maintain a diary where I jot down questions I need answers to and articulate my thoughts for the audience. Despite my stubbornness, the invaluable advice I've received from everyone here has genuinely influenced me. Without hesitation, I decided to lower the stereo system's volume. I shared my meeting with Mike, explaining that his wife, like me, encouraged him to live separately. I emphasized that infidelity unfortunately became common in marriage. leading him to think his reaction was exaggerated. I conveyed that there was some truth in his wife's viewpoint, suggesting that staying with a cheater unwittingly normalizes betrayal. Furthermore, I opined that it would be crucial for his wife to witness the consequences my wife faced after losing her marriage. Perhaps she wouldn't have taken the action she did. I also mentioned that Mike's divorce and our conversation brought back painful memories, making me reflect on her infidelity and our marriage. She reacted with anger and defensiveness, criticizing Mike and objecting again to me calling her relationship with a colleague treason. Trying to avoid a difficult discussion, I advised her to disregard this issue, expressing regret for bringing it up and suggesting we focus on the beauty of trees and flowers. In response, I turned on the radio again, and we endured about 30 minutes of awkward silence. Eventually, she seemed to calm down, apologized, and expressed a desire to talk. Reluctantly, I agreed, allowing her to continue the conversation. Her first question was whether I still loved her, and I honestly admitted that I was not sure. She claimed to know about my feelings for her. Curious, I asked how she could be sure when I couldn't figure it out myself. She said that love is an action, not just a feeling. She feels my love because I am devoted to our family. I am a devoted father, faithfully fulfilling my duties every day, even receiving her during our separation. Even in the toughest times, she trusted me infinitely. When she needed me, she knew she could rely on me without hesitation. Being next to me, she felt confident for herself and our daughter. She believed that all my actions stemmed from love, and if she felt I loved her, she considered it genuine affection. She asked if I believed she loved me, and I confidently replied that I knew what she loved. I admitted that her life would probably be easier if she decided to leave, and love would be the driving force behind her decision. I wondered why she chose to stay despite putting our family at risk during the betrayal. I couldn't understand how she could claim to love me and still behave that way. I expressed my doubts, suggesting that something might be lacking in me, making her seek connections with another person. I was puzzled why she never raised these issues with me, stressing that she should have ended the relationship, not changed. This upset her, and she emphatically stated that leaving had not even been considered by her. She loved me very much, but I couldn't grasp how consistent and logical her words were. I wondered why she would enter a relationship with another man if she wasn't dissatisfied. I questioned if I hadn't given her enough attention to make her feel wanted and loved. Though she assured me I did nothing wrong, she admitted that in our long-term relationship, she began taking these aspects for granted. In this situation, I might have done these actions for her out of a sense of duty or obligation. She also expressed uncertainty about our relationship, mentioning that she always noticed attention from other women. It made her feel inferior, as if she didn't have a special place in my life. She believed that without her presence, I would have had many alternatives. This fact attracted her to a partner much older than us, short and bald, with a big belly, completely opposite to me in appearance. She mentioned seeing photos of his wife, an average middle-aged woman, normal but not particularly attractive compared to her. My wife, younger and more attractive, felt she had a special place in his heart. Thanks to his undivided attention, she felt incredibly confident and valuable. She found great pleasure in the intense, almost obsessive desire he felt for her. She understood she was the only one causing such strong emotions in him. It had an intoxicating effect on her, almost like a potent substance. My curiosity got the best of me, and I asked if she had any suspicions about my loyalty. Surprisingly, she firmly denied any concerns, trusting my loyalty and devotion, believing I wouldn't betray her. However, when I dated other women during our breakup, her perception drastically changed, leading to a violent reaction. I questioned why I wasn't deserving of the same loyalty. She insisted she was loyal and devoted, stressing she would never change, but I reminded her of messages planning a physical relationship during a company event. To my surprise, she dismissed it, claiming to boost his ego, and the company wouldn't send her this year. She did it to support his faith and ensure a constant flow of attention. Curious, I asked if she was attracted to him. She grinned and denied it. Expressing my confusion, I explained her statement seemed contradictory. In response, she compared her SMS relationship to the man's use of explicit content to boost energy levels. There's enthusiasm and anticipation around her and his partner, indicating a strong bond, but it doesn't mean a lack of love. This contrasts with someone discussing their love partner, feeling cheerful and inspired by attention. As a result, her connection with me became even more pleasant. This made me reflect on how intense our relationship was. Before day, she talked about her feelings with great enthusiasm. According to her, this connection played a crucial role in boosting her self-esteem. She made it clear that her relationship with him had nothing to do with these feelings. It became obvious that these were the very problems she diligently addressed in therapy. However, I've never turned to a therapist because it's always been a difficult topic for me. Mental health problems were common in my father's family, who suffered from serious illnesses. Despite his condition, he managed to function well most of the time, experiencing occasional bouts of delirium. In contrast, his mother's condition was much more severe, leading to repeated placements in psychiatric clinics. Witnessing how his mother was subjected to extremely cruel and inadequate care, my father developed a distrust of mental health professionals. As a child of a father who feared doctors and hospitals, I also developed a deep-rooted distrust of mental health professionals. The constant worry that my father would be suddenly separated from his family during bouts of illness filled me with anxiety. Fortunately, I managed to avoid the same problems that my father and grandmother had. Having passed the age when symptoms usually appear, I became more inclined to ignore emerging signs. I decided to abandon the idea of marriage counseling after one meeting with 2 psychotherapists left me extremely uncomfortable. Now, I don't know how to overcome the emotional burden I carry. Perhaps therapy could be beneficial, but I'm afraid my spouse can only share what's beneficial to her. It's a dilemma. When we arrived at our destination, we started packing my aunt's belongings. Spending time with my uncle has become a routine, but there's always a strange feeling when sorting out someone's things after they pass away. The first time I felt this was when my father passed away. It struck me that all their possessions remained, but they were no longer there. Their whole life fit into objects, many of which might seem insignificant to us, but were important to them. Unfortunately, we'll never grasp the reasons for their attachments. In a somber atmosphere, we returned home, reflecting on the challenging process of sorting out my aunt's things, going over our detailed conversation, feeling its weight, exhausted by the long day. We delved into our relationship and contemplated seeking marriage counseling. Despite my doubts, I promised her to seriously consider this idea. I'm unsure how to interpret the details of her affair and the person involved. Should I trust her story? And even if I do, will it bring me any comfort or upset me more? I'm not sure yet. Our conversation went deeper than before, and driving played a role, allowing us to open up without looking into each other's eyes. It was almost like being in a confession booth. Opening up about some problems seems more pleasant. Maybe this will help us move forward, whether it strengthens the marriage or leads to a breakup. Nevertheless, it's progress, and I find encouragement in the fact that we both persevered through the discomfort. I managed not to withdraw, a positive step. She overcame her defensive attitude, which had hindered our conversations in the past. I may have contributed to her tendency to downplay some issues. I'm not saying her act wasn't serious. It does jeopardize the relationship. However, in my view, Mike's wife's infidelity was much more severe. She had an affair with a mutual friend they spent time with, a friend her husband also considered close. Throughout the story, it was clear she repeatedly had an affair with her partner, even within their shared home and bed. Reflecting on it, I admitted that if my wife had shown even a fraction of such disrespect, I would have ended the relationship quickly. I firmly believe that if she had taken their relationship beyond the virtual space, I would have left without hesitation. This part of the conversation troubled me, but I commend my wife's courage for reporting the affair to HR, given the company policy against fraternization. I also informed the other person's spouse that I would take action if she didn't, stressing the importance of proper behavior to delay the divorce process. I'm not sure how much credit is due to her, but the unfaithful wife eventually quit her job after the situation became public. Otherwise, she might have faced dismissal, though it's doubtful considering her experience and professional mentor role. However, this would have caused complications and led to his dismissal. Apparently, the betrayed spouse also decided to divorce him, and my wife and I are working on preserving our family. gradually rebuilding our faithful and spiritual connections.
I arrived home earlier than I typically would that evening. The humidity outside hung thick in the air, a sign of the storm that was about to break. Inside, the house felt unnaturally quiet. The usual sounds of Lila bustling around downstairs were conspicuously absent. My thoughts were still a tangled mess from a long day at work, deadlines, meetings, and the relentless grind. All I craved was to walk through that door, pop open a cold beer, and sink into the couch. Perhaps I'd catch a brief moment of relaxation before Lila shared whatever trivial activities had filled her day. But the instant I stepped inside, something felt amiss. It wasn't overt at first, just a subtle change in the atmosphere. The air seemed different, heavier, almost oppressive. It wrapped around me as I lingered in the entryway, straining to understand what had shifted. There was no TV murmuring in the background, no clinking dishes in the sink, and no footsteps approaching to greet me. Just an unsettling silence. I began to ascend the stairs, though I couldn't quite explain what drew me upward. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was intuition. Yet, something in the pit of my stomach urged me to follow the eerie stillness as I neared the top. I slowed my pace, attempting to make as little noise as possible. And then I heard it, a sound that made me halt, a muffled groan. Soft, yet unmistakable. I didn't want to believe it. I fought against acknowledging the reality of what my instincts were screaming at me. For a moment, I was caught between disbelief and rage, my heart pounding so fiercely in my chest it felt as if it might explode. But I remained frozen. I couldn't bring myself to move. Not yet. Another moan, louder this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of movement. It was emanating from the bedroom, our bedroom. I edged closer, the carpet absorbing my footsteps as I reached the door. It stood slightly ajar, just enough for me to catch a glimpse in the mirror on the opposite wall. And there they were, entwined on the bed I had shared with Lila for years. She was beneath him, her face flushed and lost in the moment, utterly oblivious to my presence, and him. Lucas, my best friend, the guy who had stood by my side at our wedding, who had toasted to our happiness, who had been part of my life for as long as I could remember. He was hovering over her, his body pressing into hers in a way that twisted my stomach. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut, raw and visceral. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I didn't utter a sound. I just stood there, watching. Every fiber of my being urged me to burst in, tear them apart, and make them pay for their treachery. In that moment, I wanted to, but I didn't. My fists clenched tightly, knuckles turning white as I fought the overwhelming urge to kick down the door, smash his face in, and scream at Lila, demanding answers, forcing her to explain how she could throw away everything we'd built together for a fleeting moment of cheap passion with the one person I had once called my brother. But no, that would be too easy, too impulsive. I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I slowly backed away, retreating down the stairs as quietly as I had arrived. Each step felt heavier than the last, my mind swirling with rage, betrayal, and something colder, purpose. I wasn't going to confront them. Not now. Not like this. There was something far more satisfying about the plan I was hatching. Once I reached the bottom of the stairs, I slipped out the front door, making sure to close it quietly behind me. The world outside had turned dark, and the first drops of rain began to fall. But I barely noticed. I wandered to my car in a daze. Every breath I took was laced with anger. Sitting behind the wheel, I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that I thought it might snap in my hands. The image of them together burned in my mind, her face alight with pleasure, his body looming over hers as if he had every right to be there. This kind of betrayal doesn't merely shatter trust. It obliterates it completely, leaving a void where love once flourished. But this wouldn't culminate in a blind, furious rage. No, I would grant them time. Time to think they had gotten away with it. Time to believe I was completely oblivious. Lila, sweet, deceitful Lila, would continue her charade, playing the devoted wife, preparing my dinners, kissing me goodnight. While I sat there, knowing she was sneaking off to be with him. And Lucas? He would carry on as if nothing were wrong, as if he weren't sleeping with the one person he should never have touched. They thought they were clever, hiding their affair from me, but I was about to show them what true cleverness looked like. My plan came to me slowly, but with a clarity that even surprised me. I wasn't just going to expose them. I intended to dismantle their lives piece by piece. I would strip away everything that mattered to them, and the best part was that they wouldn't see it coming. By the time they realized what I had done, it would be too late. And Lucas? He had no idea how personal this was about to get. He cherished his wife, Chloe, as if she were a precious trophy, always so proud of his little family. Well, if he wanted to destroy mine, then it was only fair I dismantled his in return. I would take Chloe from him, not just away from him, but in the most intimate way possible. I would make her mine, just as he had done with Lila. But unlike him, I wouldn't rush it. This wasn't about a cheap affair. No, this was about power, control, revenge. I started the car, the engine roaring to life as the rain intensified, pounding against the windshield. My grip on the wheel relaxed a little, a cold smile creeping across my face. This wasn't the end of my marriage. It was just the beginning of their downfall, and I was going to savor every moment of it. That night, I drove aimlessly through the rain-soaked streets, letting the rhythmic patter of raindrops against the windshield drown out the storm brewing within me. The anger still simmered, but it had morphed into something colder and sharper. The initial shock of catching Lila and Lucas together faded, replaced by a clear, calculated determination. Revenge. Genuine revenge couldn't be hurried. It wasn't something to be executed in a fit of rage that would leave me looking like the fool they believed me to be. No, I wanted to dismantle them both, piece by piece, so that when they finally grasped what had happened, they would be left standing amidst the ruins of their own lives. To do that, I needed to start with Lucas. I parked in a shadowy lot, rain pelting the car as I sat, my mind racing like a runaway train. Lucas was always full of himself, confident in his belief that he could take what was mine without any consequences. The truth was he had no idea how exposed he really was. To him, I was just a naive pushover, but he didn't realize how well I knew his life, his vulnerabilities, and yes, his wife Chloe. Chloe was the key to all of this. Lucas and Chloe had been together forever, embodying that idyllic suburban lifestyle, a cozy house, a couple of kids, and the quintessential white picket fence. He flaunted their perfect life at every opportunity, boasting about his accomplishments. What better way to strike at him than to take from him what he cherished most? But this wasn't going to be a cheap thrill where I simply seduced her and bragged about it afterward. No, it had to be much more profound, more intimate. I didn't just want to sleep with Chloe. I intended to take her away from him in the most gut-wrenching way imaginable. I would make her fall for me, make her question everything she believed about Lucas. In the end, she would lose faith in him and choose me, not out of mere lust, but from a place of genuine love. And when that moment came, I would allow Lucas to witness as everything he held dear crumbled before his eyes. What made this plan so exquisite was how effortless it would be. I understood Chloe's insecurities, her fears, and her longings. She wasn't like Lila. Chloe was more subdued, contemplative, with a delicate nature that Lucas never truly valued. To him, she was simply another trophy, something to show off at family functions or among friends. But I knew better. I had seen the fractures in their relationship long before this moment. I had witnessed her vulnerability, and now I was ready to exploit it. As I glanced at my phone, I pondered whether tonight was the night to make my first move. But no, patience was crucial. I couldn't come on too strong or act impulsively. I needed to lay the groundwork with precision. So, I drove home, settling back into my role as the unsuspecting husband. Lila had no clue about my knowledge, and that was my greatest weapon. Entering the house, I could hear Lila humming softly upstairs, preparing for bed. Each note of that song echoed with her betrayal. I kept my expression neutral as I moved through the kitchen, grabbing a drink. She appeared downstairs, donning one of my old, worn t-shirts, the kind she always loved to sleep in. It used to be charming, but now it felt like a cruel joke. "You're home late," she remarked casually, filling a glass with water. The nonchalance in her tone sent chills down my spine, as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just betrayed me in our bed. The audacity was almost impressive. "Yeah," I replied, keeping my voice even. "Got caught up at work." She approached me, kissing my cheek, acting as if everything was perfectly normal. "I missed you today." I flashed her a cold smile, one that had become my mask. "I missed you too." The lies flowed from my lips effortlessly now, as if they were second nature. As she turned to head back upstairs, I watched her retreat, contemplating how long she thought she could maintain this charade. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet, not until my plan was fully in motion. She and Lucas believed they were secure, convinced they could carry on their affair in secret. Little did they know, the ground beneath them was already beginning to shift. The following day, I initiated my plan. I reached out to Chloe, framing it as a casual check-in, something any friend would do. We had known each other for years, so a little small talk wouldn't raise any alarms. I sent her a simple message, asking how she was doing and if she wanted to catch up. She replied almost instantly, likely relieved to find a distraction from whatever hollow excuse of a relationship she had left with Lucas. Within a few days, we set up a meeting for coffee. This wasn't unusual. Lucas and I were close, and the four of us had shared plenty of time together over the years. But this time was different. This was a calculated move. We met at a quiet cafe in town, the type of place where no one paid attention to who occupied which table. Chloe looked worn out, the weight of life pressing down on her. She smiled when she saw me, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Thanks for meeting me," I said, keeping my tone light and friendly. "It's been a while since we caught up." "Yeah, it has," she replied, her voice soft and a bit strained. "Things have been busy." I didn't need her to elaborate. I knew exactly what she meant. Lucas, the so-called perfect husband, was anything but. I encouraged her to talk, asking about the kids, her studio, all while observing her closely, taking note of every subtle change in her expression and every flicker of doubt that crossed her face. Then the conversation turned personal, and I felt I had her right where I wanted her. "I've been struggling with everything lately," she admitted, her gaze dropping to the table. "It feels like Lucas and I are drifting apart, like we're not connecting anymore." I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice low and filled with concern. "I'm sorry to hear that, Chloe. You deserve so much better." Her eyes met mine, searching for something, validation perhaps. I gave it to her, fully aware of what she craved. "You've always been such a good friend," she said, relief evident in her voice. "I don't know what I'd do without people like you." I smiled, warmth in my expression entirely feigned. "You're not alone. I'm always here if you need to talk." She smiled back, but it was a sad one, a smile belonging to someone beginning to realize that her perfect life wasn't so perfect after all. And that's exactly what I wanted, to sow the seeds of doubt in her mind, to make her question everything she thought she knew. That was my mission. As I left the cafe that afternoon, a surge of triumph washed over me. Everything was falling into place, one calculated move after another. Lucas was blissfully unaware that the woman he was betraying me with would soon be the very one who would cause him to lose everything. I walked back to my car, the rain drizzling softly, a fitting backdrop to the storm brewing inside me. This was just the beginning. The day after my meeting with Chloe, I felt an exhilarating thrill simmer beneath the calm facade I presented to the world. The slow burn of revenge had ignited, and I was fully committed now. Lucas remained blind to the trap tightening around him, while Chloe was starting to look at me as more than just her husband's friend. It was subtle, but that was the way I wanted it for now. She needed to trust me, to see me as someone who understood her in ways Lucas never could. Meanwhile, Lila continued to play her part, completely oblivious to the shifting tides. She still bombarded me with mundane texts during the day, insipid messages about grocery lists or weekend plans, while I was acutely aware of where her thoughts wandered when I wasn't around. She assumed I was oblivious, that I hadn't caught on to the twisted game she and Lucas were playing. But soon, she would discover how utterly mistaken she was. It was a Thursday evening, roughly a week after my coffee with Chloe, when I decided it was time to escalate my plan. I knew Lucas would be stuck at work late, entangled in a big project that he had mentioned. It served as the perfect cover for his extracurricular escapades. But tonight, it wasn't Lila I was focused on. It was Chloe. I made my way to their house, my excuse already solidified in my mind. I would drop by unannounced, playing the role of the concerned friend. Chloe had confided in me during our last conversation, expressing feelings of neglect. I knew she would welcome the visit, even appreciate the company. As I pulled up to their two-story home, the rain intensified, the streetlights casting a warm glow on the slick pavement. Through their living room window, I caught a glimpse of the flickering TV light, a cozy scene illuminated from behind the curtains. It felt almost too easy. I knocked on the door, ensuring my demeanor was casual and unhurried. A moment later, Chloe opened the door, surprise evident on her face. "Oh, hey," she exclaimed, stepping aside to let me in. "I didn't expect to see you," she added, genuine surprise coloring her tone. I smiled nonchalantly, shaking off the rain from my jacket. "Yeah, I thought I'd drop by and check in. Just happened to be in the neighborhood." It was a complete fabrication. I hadn't been anywhere near their neighborhood. But the look in her eyes showed that she didn't mind. She seemed genuinely happy to see me, even if she didn't yet realize why. "Lucas is not home," she said, a hint of apology lacing her voice. "I know," I replied, my tone casual and relaxed. "I'm here for you." The words took her by surprise, and I noticed the flicker of uncertainty cross her features. Quickly, she masked it, offering me a smile as she led me into the living room. "Can I get you something to drink?" she asked, her voice light but tinged with a hint of nervousness. "Wine would be great," I said, settling into the couch as she disappeared into the kitchen. I could hear the clinking of glasses and the soft hum of the refrigerator door opening and closing. When she returned, she handed me a glass of red and took a seat next to me, closer than usual. "How are you holding up?" I asked, keeping my voice low and warm, the perfect picture of concern. Chloe sighed, staring into her glass. "It's been tough," she admitted. "Lucas has been so distant, and I don't know. Sometimes it feels like he doesn't care at all." I nodded, feigning empathy. "You're not wrong to feel that way," I said, careful to maintain a supportive tone. "You know how Lucas can be. He often fails to appreciate what he has." She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine for reassurance. "You've always been so good to us," she said quietly. "I honestly don't know what I'd do without friends like you." I let her words linger, allowing their weight to settle between us. Then, I reached over and placed my hand gently on her knee. "You deserve more than this, Chloe," I whispered, my voice soft and sincere. "You deserve someone who truly values you." Her breath caught, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she sat there, staring at me, the uncertainty in her eyes beginning to shift towards something deeper. I felt the air change, thickening with tension as the space between us seemed to shrink. "I don't know what to do," she murmured, her voice trembling slightly. "I do," I said, leaning in just enough to signal my intent but not crossing that delicate line. "At least not yet. You deserve better than what Lucas gives you, and I think you know that in your heart." Her gaze fell to where my hand rested on her knee, and I could see the battle waging within her. She was torn between her loyalty to her husband and the undeniable allure of something she craved, something Lucas had clearly failed to provide. "I shouldn't," she started, but I gently interrupted her, my voice soothing and coaxing. "I'm not asking for anything, Chloe. I'm simply speaking the truth." She hesitated, her breath shallow, and for a brief moment, I feared she might pull away. But then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, she leaned toward me, her lips parting ever so slightly, her eyes fluttering shut. It would have been so easy to kiss her then, to take that final step. But no, not yet. This wasn't about rushing things. It was about planting the seeds of doubt and desire, letting her come to me when she was ready. That's where the true power lay, in making her want it. I leaned back slightly, creating space between us, observing the confusion play across her face. "I should get going," I said casually, though I let just enough tension linger in the air to keep her on edge. Chloe blinked, as if emerging from a dream. Yeah, maybe that's a good idea, she murmured. I stood, placing my glass on the coffee table with a deliberate slowness. We'll talk soon, I said, offering a smile that hinted at secrets and promises unspoken. And remember, I'm here for you. As I stepped out of her house, I could sense her gaze lingering on my back, the weight of our conversation still thick in the air. She was teetering on a precipice now, caught in the fragile interplay between loyalty and temptation. All she needed was a gentle nudge, and I would be there to catch her when she fell. By the time I reached my car, the rain had subsided, leaving the air cool and damp. I lingered for a moment, savoring the intoxicating sense of control, knowing that the first phase of my plan was executing flawlessly. Lucas had stolen Lila from me, my wife, my life, but he had no idea that I was orchestrating the same fate for him, only with more precision and patience. When the dust settled, he wouldn't just lose Chloe. He would lose everything that mattered to him. But for now, I was content to wait, to let the tension simmer, to allow the betrayal to bubble beneath the surface until it was ready to explode. The next few days unfolded in a disquieting calm that had become my new normal. Lila continued her charade, sending sweet but hollow texts, playing the devoted wife while sneaking off to meet Lucas. They had grown reckless, perhaps convinced they were too clever for me to catch on. Watching her glide through our home, oblivious to the impending collapse of her carefully constructed facade, almost made me laugh. Yet I could feel the cracks widening. It wouldn't be long before their illusion crumbled. For now, though, I maintained my role, letting her think I was unaware. In fact, I intensified my attentiveness toward her, showering her with affection, compliments, and spontaneous date nights. If she sensed the sudden shift in my behavior, she didn't mention it. She was likely too absorbed in her own affair to notice my act. It was the perfect cover keeping her off balance. But Chloe? She was my true focus now. Since that night in her living room, I had felt a shift in her demeanor. She had started reaching out more. She began confiding in me, sharing her worries and frustrations in a way that felt increasingly intimate. It was subtle, but each time she leaned on me emotionally, I pulled her further from Lucas, creating a rift between them that he couldn't even see. By the end of the week, I was ready to escalate my plans. I had exercised patience, careful not to push too hard, but the timing was right. Lucas was set to leave town for a work conference, a detail he had proudly shared with me just days before. It was almost laughable how oblivious he was, blissfully unaware that his absence would provide me the perfect opportunity to advance my intentions with Chloe. On Friday evening, I shot her a message. Nothing too forward, just a simple, "How are you holding up? Need some company?" Her reply came almost instantly. She was home alone and could definitely use the distraction. I wasted no time. The drive over was quick, but my heart raced with anticipation. The rain had ceased for the night, leaving the streets slick and glimmering under the streetlights. The cool air carried the scent of damp asphalt and something else, a sense of inevitability. Tonight, I would push things a little further. When I arrived at her house, she greeted me with a weary smile. "Thanks for coming," she said softly, stepping aside to let me in. "It's been a long week." I could see the exhaustion etched on her face, the quiet sadness that seemed to weigh her down. Lucas's neglect had clearly taken its toll, and she looked like someone carrying a burden far too heavy. This was precisely what I had hoped for. "I'm always here when you need me," I replied, giving her the reassuring smile that had begun to feel like second nature. We settled into the living room, the lights dimmed, creating a cozy, intimate atmosphere. She poured us both a glass of wine, a casual gesture that felt electric in the stillness. I sat beside her on the couch, close enough for her to feel my presence, but not so close as to make her uncomfortable. Not yet. At first, we chatted about mundane topics, work, the kids, those little details that filled her daily life. But as the wine flowed and the evening deepened, the conversation began to shift. I could feel her walls crumbling, the vulnerability I had nurtured in her surfacing like a tide. "It's just, I don't know how much longer I can pretend everything's fine, she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. Lucas is never around, and when he is, it's like he's a ghost. I feel like I'm losing him, or maybe I've already lost him. Her words hung heavily in the air, thick with emotion. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the crack in her armor that I could slip through. I reached out, gently placing my hand over hers, my touch soft yet deliberate. You haven't lost him, Chloe, I said quietly. But maybe it's time to let go of something that isn't there anymore. You deserve more than being an afterthought in your own marriage. She looked up at me, her eyes wide and searching. I don't know what to do, she whispered, her voice tinged with desperation. I've tried everything to fix things. I just want to make it work. But I feel so alone, she whispered, her voice trembling. You're not alone, I replied, my tone steady and reassuring. I'm here. I've always been here. Then, without a second thought, she leaned in, her lips brushing against mine softly, tentatively, as if she were testing the waters of a connection she had never imagined. I kissed her back, savoring the moment just long enough before pulling away, my breath steady and calm, as if this was exactly how things were meant to unfold. Her eyes widened, shock flickering across her features. I shouldn't have done that, she stammered, instinctively pulling back and covering her mouth with her hand. I'm sorry. I shook my head gently, my voice soothing. Don't apologize. You did nothing wrong. Confusion and guilt battled behind her eyes, and I knew the storm raging within her. But what about Lucas? She asked, her voice laced with uncertainty. Lucas is not here, Chloe. I finished for her. And if he were, would he even notice what you're going through? Her silence spoke volumes, confirming everything I suspected. She had crossed a line, and deep down she knew it. But the truth was she didn't regret it. Not really. She was caught between the guilt of betrayal and the relief of feeling something real again. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted, tears pooling in her eyes. I just feel so lost. I took her hand in mine, squeezing it gently. You're not lost. You're beginning to see things for what they truly are. The silence between us stretched, heavy with unspoken truths. She was standing on the brink, teetering between the life she had known and the possibility of something new, something that could fill the void Lucas had left behind. And I was right there, ready to catch her when she fell. This time, when she leaned in, there was no hesitation. Her kiss held an urgency, a quiet desperation that had been building within her for far too long. I wrapped my arms around her, drawing her closer, feeling the warmth radiate from her body as the weight of our choices melted away. In that moment, neither of us was thinking about Lucas, and I wasn't thinking about Lila. The kisses deepened, shifting from soft brushes of lips to a slow, deliberate exploration. My hands found their way to her waist, pulling her closer as hers trailed up my chest, gripping my shirt as if anchoring herself in the reality of what we were doing. Chloe pulled back slightly, breathless, her eyes dark with conflicting desires. I don't know if we should, she started, but I silenced her with another kiss, slow and deliberate, allowing her to feel the safety of my touch. We're already here, Chloe. Her hesitation crumbled as she kissed me again, deeper this time. I felt her walls fall away as she surrendered to the moment. We moved in perfect sync, neither of us rushing, but both acutely aware of the inevitable. As I kissed the curve of her neck, I felt her body arch toward mine, her breath catching in her throat. My hands slipped beneath her shirt, exploring the softness of her skin along the small of her back. When we finally made our way to the bedroom, the tension that had built between us snapped, giving way to something that had simmered for far too long. An unspoken understanding lingered in the air. Whatever guilt or hesitation we had felt was washed away. The hours that followed blurred into a whirlwind of stolen moments and whispered confessions, our hands and mouths exploring familiar yet forbidden territory. We began slowly, savoring each touch, each lingering caress. But as the night wore on, passion overtook restraint, and we let go completely, leaving nothing unsaid or undone. When it was over, we lay together in the stillness, the room enveloped in darkness, broken only by the sound of our breathing gradually returning to normal. Chloe rested her head on my chest, her fingers tracing delicate patterns along my arm. "I never thought I'd do something like this," she whispered, her voice thick with exhaustion yet tinged with relief. I didn't respond. I simply held her close, my fingers weaving through her hair as I stared up at the ceiling. I could feel the shift within her, the way she had crossed a line she could never uncross. And a part of me reveled in it. Chloe had been lost in her marriage for far too long, and now she was mine. As she drifted off to sleep, I felt that familiar surge of satisfaction. This wasn't merely about the physical act, though that had been inevitable. This was about control, about turning the tables on Lucas in a way he couldn't possibly foresee. The beauty of it all was that Chloe would never suspect this was part of a larger scheme. To her, this was a genuine connection, a moment of passion born from neglect and loneliness. The weeks following that night unfolded like a slow, inevitable march towards something darker. I maintained the momentum, carefully balancing my subtle manipulation of Lila and Lucas while keeping my bond with Chloe hidden. She was drawn to me now, completely ensnared, and with every text, every touch, I pulled her deeper into my orbit. About 3 weeks later, we were all invited to another dinner party. It was a small gathering, casual and friendly, the kind of evening that would have felt normal before everything had shifted. But nothing was normal anymore. Not after what had transpired between us. Lucas and Lila were there, as always, pretending their affair was some well-guarded secret. They laughed with our mutual friends, as if they weren't betraying the very people they professed to love. Their act was convincing. I'd give them that. But tonight wasn't about them. Tonight was about Chloe. As we mingled, the atmosphere buzzed with idle chatter and the low hum of casual conversations. I kept close to Chloe, mindful of not raising any suspicions, but it wasn't long before she seized a chance to pull me aside. She gestured toward the kitchen, her face pale and her eyes wide, reflecting an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Maybe fear, or something even more profound. Intrigued, I followed her as we slipped into the kitchen, escaping the others. As the door swung shut behind us, the laughter and chatter faded into the background. My hand shook slightly as she turned to face me, her eyes darting away, nervously twisting the hem of her sleeve. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice low yet steady. There was something undeniably wrong, a palpable tension radiating from her. She inhaled deeply, her lips trembling as she finally met my gaze. I don't know how to say this," she whispered, her voice barely a murmur. "Just say it," I urged, stepping closer, my mind racing with possibilities. I could sense her anxiety escalating, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to steady herself. "I'm pregnant," she blurted, her words hanging in the air like a bomb that had just detonated. For a heartbeat, I was rendered speechless. My mind grappled with the shock, the impact of her revelation hitting me like a fist to the stomach. Pregnant. Chloe was pregnant. And it wasn't Lucas's child. I swallowed hard, trying to maintain my composure as a rush of thoughts swirled in my mind. This wasn't what I had anticipated. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice low, my eyes scanning hers for any indication this was a false alarm. She nodded, biting her lip, tears pooling in her eyes. "I've taken all the tests. It's real." A long, tense silence followed as we both grappled with the implications of her statement. She was pregnant with my child, conceived during this tangled web of deceit. And Lucas, he had no clue that the woman he believed was his would soon carry a child that wasn't his. "What about Lucas?" I asked, carefully controlling my tone, though I could feel a knot tightening in my chest. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "He doesn't know anything. I haven't told him yet. I don't want to hurt him. But he's been hurting you for years." I interjected, my voice laced with quiet intensity. "He deserves to know the truth, Chloe. You deserve to be free of him." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she shook her head. "I can't tell him. I can't. I don't know how he'll react." I stepped closer, placing my hands on her shoulders, compelling her to meet my gaze. "Listen to me." This is our opportunity, Chloe. He's not what you need anymore. You know that. He's been neglecting you, taking you for granted while you've been dealing with everything all on your own. But you're not alone now. You have me." She looked up at me, the weight of my words beginning to sink in. "I don't know if I can do this," she murmured, her voice trembling. "You can," I replied firmly. "You don't have to face this alone. You don't owe him anything anymore." She hesitated, biting her lip as the tears continued to fall, but I noticed a shift in her demeanor, a dawning realization that everything was changing, whether she was ready for it or not. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I cupped her face in my hands, wiping away her tears with my thumb. "You don't have to be scared. I'm here. We'll navigate this together." The gravity of the situation enveloped us as we stood there in the hushed kitchen, the sounds of the party continuing just beyond the door. Chloe was pregnant with my child, and Lucas was completely unaware. The irony struck me hard. He had stolen my wife, and now I had taken something far more precious from him. The pressing question lingered. What would happen next? We couldn't keep this secret forever. Eventually, the truth would surface. And when it did, the fallout would be nothing short of catastrophic. But that was precisely what I wanted. I needed Lucas to experience the full impact of his actions, to watch as his life unraveled in ways he couldn't begin to fathom. Chloe took a deep breath, steadying herself, her hands resting protectively on her stomach, a gesture that spoke volumes about her evolving understanding of our reality. "We'll figure it out," I reassured her, my voice soft yet resolute. She nodded, her determination strengthening as she wiped away her last tears. Okay, we both recognized there was no turning back. Everything had shifted, and soon everyone would know. But for the moment, we would keep this secret a little longer, letting the tension build until it reached its breaking point. As we rejoined the party, Lucas's laughter filled the room, and Lila's smile brightened the space beside him. They had no inkling that their perfect little world was on the brink of collapse, that in just a few months, their lives would be shattered beyond repair. I caught Chloe's gaze as she glanced at Lucas, then back to me. Fear flickered in her eyes, but so did something darker, deeper. This was no longer just about betrayal. It was about the reckoning that awaited all of us. It was only a matter of time before the truth erupted into the open, leaving devastation in its wake. And when that moment arrived, I would stand in the ashes, witnessing as everything they cherished burned to the ground. Stay tuned, because this story is about to get much darker. Trust me, the next chapter will make this one look like a fairy tale.
My wife's cheating was exposed after her girl trip, and karma delivered justice before I could. I work the night shift, and my wife works the day shift. Her workplace mostly has male colleagues, so she spends more time with them. However, there are also women in auxiliary roles, like in the office or the spare parts department. We've been together since we were 17, and now we're in our 40s with children. I won't go into the details of our family life. It's worth noting that she recently started working in this field, so workplace relationships have become a new thing. She's been spending more time with her female colleagues after work, not just occasionally. She finishes work around 5:00 but comes home at 7 or 8. A couple of times, she even stayed overnight at their place after drinking, which surprises me because she's usually responsible and doesn't drink in public places. But for now, I'm not too worried. I was at home last night, not working, and went to bed at my usual time at 3 a.m. Her phone screen's glow woke me up. I couldn't tell if she was texting or browsing the internet, and she didn't seem to hide it from me, so probably nothing suspicious. However, she got up and started getting ready for work, even though her shift doesn't start until 8. I asked her about it, and she agreed, but said she was going for a walk with her colleagues. She's a diesel engine repair mechanic and looked more dressed up than I'd expect for a walk or a regular work day. She left around 4, probably reaching her friend's place by 4:30. It was still dark, drizzling, and about 45 degrees outside, which doesn't seem like good conditions for a walk, especially in Arizona, where raincoats aren't common. Also, she drives a truck, and I drive a car. At 5, I texted her about using the truck for a dump run, but she didn't respond. So I called her 15 minutes later, and she said they were still on the walk. She asked me to pick up the truck at her workplace. If it weren't raining, I might have considered checking if her hair was wet after a second shower. I tend to overanalyze things due to my unique way of thinking and sometimes have trouble reading social cues. So I'm wondering if I'm overthinking this. I decided to confront her and ask to see her phone. She tried to divert my attention and demanded to see my phone, which I gave her along with the password. I had nothing to hide since I hardly have any personal time, let alone meet others. However, when I checked her active messages, nothing was deleted. But when I tried to find a specific conversation that had caught my attention earlier, it had oddly disappeared. Feeling suspicious, I called the person who had raised my fears, hoping to see his name. I handed her the phone and told her I wanted to see their text conversation. She acted innocent, but I pointed out that she messaged him before leaving home and after returning, even when she claimed to be in Vegas. Instead of explaining, she acted confused, as if she didn't understand why the telephone operator had stored their messages. Disappointed, she went upstairs and refused to talk further. Feeling hurt and betrayed, I decided to pack up and leave. I informed her of my intentions and left after packing my things. Now let me share what I learned from the police investigator about the confrontation. Firstly, he emphasized that for minor offenses, the guilty party rarely fully admits it. Even if they confess in one instance, they often withhold important details. So it's unrealistic to expect a complete admission, especially in cases of ongoing infidelity. When you find yourself in such a situation, it's a major breach of trust, and you might need to consider legal action or making a significant decision. You're essentially looking for more information to use later. He also advises starting a confrontation by suggesting you have more information than they think and encouraging them to talk. The truth is the only valuable thing in this situation, so don't reveal the extent of your knowledge. Treat it like a high-stakes poker game and don't show your hand. He also noted that despite searching her phone, don't expect to find anything. It's likely well hidden or already deleted. Unless they lack intelligence, perpetrators tend to conceal evidence, anticipating a confrontation. Your job is to establish the absence of text messages and call logs to provide evidence. It's crucial to obtain records of text messages and calls from your telecom operator and check for gaps in dates and times. Lack of communication with a specific person suggests they were together in these moments. Make them believe you have the information while concealing its limitations. Obtaining direct evidence of their wrongdoing is often challenging. During a confrontation, demand access to their phone. They will likely resist and demand to see your phone, making similar accusations. Be prepared for them to stare at you. My wife reacted the same way when I asked. She claimed not to know my password and insisted I reveal it. Remember that guilty parties fear being discovered and are more concerned about what you might find on their phone than what they might find on yours. Pay attention to their willingness to disclose information relevant to you. In my case, my wife showed very little interest. She barely looked at the messages and didn't even check the photo gallery where questionable content is usually found. Instead, she was more focused on the phone in my hand as I casually scrolled through a list of harmless text conversations. She even said, "See, I don't know what you think I'm up to." To continue my investigation, I opened the phone app, entered the suspect's number, and tapped on the SMS icon. To my surprise, there were no messages. I went back to the contact and showed it to her, asking about the missing messages. She replied that they never communicated. I disagreed and informed her that in just the past month she had exchanged over 900 messages with him. I pressed her to reveal where those messages had gone. Initially, she pretended to be innocent, but deep down, she likely knew that the number I provided was accurate. Reluctantly, she admitted she had deleted them, but didn't disclose the whole truth. It turned out those messages were about her wanting a divorce, which she wasn't ready to tell me yet. I didn't give away too many details like how far my suspicions had gone. Instead, I provided enough information to instill confidence and make it clear that I had full knowledge of the situation. Knowing the exact number of texts was important as it served as solid evidence, reinforcing the message that I wasn't bluffing when I claimed to know something. This behavior is a typical sign of guilt. When someone is caught in a tough spot, they often try to dodge and use various tactics to avoid responsibility. To deflect blame, they often offer explanations about their whereabouts. However, it's crucial to closely scrutinize the information they provide. If their explanations are vague and seem forced, it's important to persistently seek more details. Many false explanations are created with little planning and can easily fall apart with further investigation. While they may provide some information about going to a bar with friends, it will likely lack specific details, such as a heated argument or who won a game of darts. Innocent spouses typically willingly share details of a pleasant evening with friends. Guilty ones, on the other hand, wonder why you're so interested in their activities. Remember, they're anticipating a confrontation and are already thinking about how an innocent person would act in this situation, crafting a plausible version. This idea applies even to drawing attention to themselves. When our oldest daughter had a conflict with my wife, she later told me she had 2 reasons for this. First, she wanted to steer the conversation in the right direction in case our daughter turned to me. Secondly, Culprits often think that by putting themselves at the center of attention, the focus will eventually fade. Looking back, I realized I made a mistake by not asking why our daughter came to that conclusion. I should have asked her to clarify what she said that led to that conclusion. Looking back, I should have taken the initiative and called my daughter myself. It's worth considering how an innocent spouse would respond when accused by someone else. They would likely be happy to provide unsolicited, detailed explanations because they have a clear conscience. Now, let's think about how an innocent person would behave. They might be annoyed by a request to see their phone since they still expect some privacy. But in the end, they would hand over the phone without much resistance. In all likelihood, they'd be genuinely puzzled at first. Honest individuals don't try to mislead or deceive others. It's also important to note that the most convincing lies often contain elements of truth. In my wife's case, she claimed to have spent time alone in a tattoo parlor getting sketches. However, when she returned home, she didn't bring any sketches or take pictures of them. Moreover, she said very little about the experience and only showed me some design ideas from the internet. She said the appointment was at 1 p.m., but she left our house at 11:30 a.m., so it only took her 45 minutes to get to the tattoo parlor. When she got back home, it was around 6 p.m. While I believe she did visit the tattoo parlor that day, I suspect she may have visited his house beforehand. Maybe they did something together, and buying a ticket for a future visit could serve as a potential alibi. They might have had lunch and deep conversations about moral theology at his place before returning home. This is when I decided to sort out the situation. So it's important to note that a simple alibi doesn't always explain every detail. She mentioned difficult traffic but didn't provide any specific details, like a blue Honda overturning. She also mentioned going to Home Depot to look for lifting belt rings but returned empty-handed, indicating an unsuccessful trip. There are other details he taught me, but I can't recall them all now. I'll report them as soon as I can. She continues to maintain a relationship with him, and it seems unlikely that things will work out between us. I've come to terms with the fact that my anger issues played a significant role in her distancing herself, but I'm actively working on improving myself and have made progress. Although she never committed to cheating, I'm ready to forgive, considering my part in this situation. She said our relationship has no hope, but she offered cohabitation for the sake of our children. I have concerns about the terms of cohabitation, as it appears to be a compromise driven by her hidden fears. In response, I offered her a divorce if that's what she really wants. However, since she hasn't mentioned it, I take it as a clear sign that she doesn't want a divorce. There's a possibility she's starting to soften her stance. As evidence, we recently went out for dinner with the kids, and she was friendly. We even had a pleasant conversation, and she maintained eye contact. At that time, I genuinely thought that the walls around her heart were starting to thaw, but things took a different turn on the way back home. She made a subtle comment seemingly to remind herself that she no longer loves me. People often say it's easy to walk away from a cheater, but when you share children, the pain of betrayal runs deep. The life I knew was closely tied to our shared existence. Those who believe I'm showing weakness can see themselves as victorious. However, this morning, I woke up to find her gone. I know where she is even without knowing where he is. I know his address. I took some photos of her truck in his garage earlier, although I'm not quite sure why I felt the need to do that. Maybe it was to understand her emotional state. When I arrived at their place, I initially spotted only his car in the driveway. To my surprise, her car was nearby. Unaware of my presence, she texted me asking if we needed any household supplies like garbage bags. I replied that we were out of groceries, and using the opportunity, I asked if she could buy cream for me. While pretending to be confident about her location, I didn't react at first. Soon, I noticed him driving his car out of the driveway, and her car was parked in reverse. It was clear they left together. I walked up to the door, intending to ring the bell, but got no response. In an attempt to initiate a conversation, I messaged her asking if she had received the mentioned letter. She said she hadn't seen it, and I shared its contents with her. After that, she expressed willingness to discuss the matter later. When she texted me that she was at Costco, I immediately replied that I knew she wasn't there. About 45 minutes later, I received a message with a photo of a familiar Costco building. It was evident she had just arrived and was creating a story. Choosing not to give in to persuasion, I asked her to send a photo of her truck if she wanted me to believe her. She calmly replied that she honestly didn't care about convincing me. At that moment, I had to acknowledge her good intentions. She might have been trying to shield me from more emotional pain. Perhaps she even feared my reaction, which made me feel regretful. However, the constant lies were causing more distress than the unfiltered truth. In an effort to confirm her words, she sent me a photo of herself inside a Costco store. Despite receiving this evidence, I chose not to respond, allowing the weight of her deception to linger in silence. I'm in a state of deep internal turmoil. contemplating those moments when, in fits of anger, I contemplated leaving her and our children. Though I'm determined not to repeat such behavior, I admit that I'm now at a point where I'm ready to explore a new path to extricate myself from this situation. Yesterday, I had a consultation with an attorney, and we discussed the current situation. Following my therapist's advice, I made a deliberate choice not to rush into decisions while my emotions are still running high. Instead, I opted to wait and carefully consider the available options. Currently, my soon-to-be ex-wife and I continue to live together for the sake of our children. It's not an easy arrangement, as I often feel financially burdened supporting the household while she's involved with another man. Adding to the complexity, she maintains a separate group chat with our kids, using it to share false information, like going out drinking with someone named Maria at 4:00 a.m. I realized she'd have to go to work soon, with just a few hours before her shift starts. Given that bars are typically closed at this time, it became evident that her recent claims of going out for drinks were mere fiction. I'm even more concerned about how these lies affect our youngest child, who, as it turns out, has autism with a high level of functioning. He tends to look up information about the opening hours of various establishments, like bars or gyms. They're starting to catch her in a web of deceit. If she can continue deceiving me without consequences, the repercussions of her dishonesty now extend to our children. But after a few quiet nights, I've reached a point where her actions no longer keep me awake at night. I've already consulted with a lawyer who informed me that with shared custody, the alimony I'll have to pay amounts to only $142 a month. My wife doesn't want to sell our family home, and it's evident that she can't buy it from me or acquire it on her own. However, according to my lawyer, if I decide to sell the house, then it will indeed be sold. This realization puts me in a somewhat challenging position. I have considerably more savings than she does, which puts my property at risk of being divided equally. Nevertheless, there are some investments and shares in the company that haven't fully matured yet. The lawyer assures me that these assets can be protected because there's still some ambiguity surrounding them. Furthermore, the lawyer suggested I could safeguard all my assets by using the house as leverage in negotiations. If I decide to contribute only half of the house payments until our children reach adulthood in 5 years, I can negotiate an equal share of future assets. By using this as a trump card, I can preserve my savings. So the situation has effectively turned into a real estate transaction. On a personal level, I have to admit that I succumbed to the stress of sleep deprivation and overwhelming grief, which led me to attempt reconciliation with an unfaithful wife. I began begging her desperately as a person lacking self-respect. About 2 weeks ago, I reached a breaking point and had to leave work early because I couldn't concentrate properly. At that moment, I hoped her car would still be parked outside the house, and that maybe a spark of affection for me would rekindle in her heart. Looking back, I now understand how crucial it is in such circumstances never to let myself appear as a fool. I tried to initiate a conversation with her, but my efforts were futile, and I couldn't help but feel pitiful. It seemed my pleas went unanswered. Sunday came and went, and I had no particular place to be. I informed her that I wouldn't be home until the workday started, giving her the opportunity to be with the kids while I was away. After buying pizza for the kids, she left again. Feeling lost and unsure of what to do, I sat in the car browsing various internet forums and getting distracted by other things. For reasons I can't entirely explain, I ended up downloading Tinder and setting up a profile. My initial intention wasn't to seek a chance encounter, so I mindlessly swiped left on all the profiles that caught my eye. However, I did strike up a conversation with one girl, though it didn't really pique my interest. The next morning, after work, I stumbled upon another profile, and despite my uncertainty, I impulsively swiped right. To my surprise, we hit it off right away, and she greeted me with a message, "Hello, handsome." It was incredibly heartening to receive such kind words at a time when I really needed them. We started chatting, and things flowed smoothly. We even had a couple of drinks together. Surprisingly, Tuesday night turned into a date. Considering the possibility that this relationship could develop into something more, I felt the need to honestly share my current situation. Starting any potential relationship on honesty is important to me. Interestingly, she had also experienced infidelity and had been divorced for some time but expressed a desire to start dating again. When the evening came to a close, I walked her to her car and we shared a kiss. It's important to note that my wife has already initiated the divorce process, so legally, we're no longer bound. To be honest, the thought of this woman and the possibility of finding hope again brought me reassurance, finally allowing me to sleep peacefully. Perhaps, in His infinite mercy, God decided to send someone to show that I am deserving of appreciation. This experience rekindled my hope for the future. And even if this connection doesn't turn into something deeper, I'm grateful for the momentary happiness she brought me. I'm well aware that everything is moving swiftly, but it's essential to recognize that my marriage has been unstable for many years. The idea of divorce has crossed my mind more than once, but I've never taken immediate action. I must admit that I didn't take active steps to salvage the marriage. The affair with her was the final straw that led to our split. Looking back, we can possibly say it was necessary since neither of us was truly happy, but neither had the courage to initiate the breakup. Reflecting on this situation, I can't help but wonder if I would have given in to the temptation of infidelity had I been put to the test. The fear of being potentially unfaithful has always kept me at a distance from other women. Unfortunately, those joyful memories my wife and I once shared now seem distant and faded, much like the memories of a terminally ill person passing away. It is a profound event that brings immediate grief when it occurs. However, I believe that in such circumstances, the awareness of the inevitability of the end arrives more swiftly, primarily due to the recognition of its inescapability. Today, I took a significant step. I made an advanced payment, officially commencing the divorce process. As a result, our cohabitation will likely end soon. My son and I decided to become neighbors and find a new place to live together. Currently, he doesn't communicate with his mother due to her infidelity. I plan to sell the house and claim my rightful share of the assets. Even though she's against it, her problem is that she can't afford the mortgage payments and won't receive enough funds from the divorce settlement to buy me out. The costs associated with initiating divorce proceedings came to $2,500. Despite the initial pain, the payoff is worth it. Day trading isn't just a hobby for me, it's a skill I excel in. With increasing profits, I anticipate taking part in larger deals. Furthermore, I've long desired to own a 1979 Fiat Spider convertible, a dream I could never justify as a responsible married man. However, circumstances have changed, and I'm no longer bound by such restrictions. So when things settle down, I'll finally get behind the wheel of the car I've longed for. I hope that by the time I purchase it, a custom license plate, as I discussed with my lawyer, will be affixed, echoing the words of the song, "Damn, It's Good to Be a Gangster." I can't help but wonder if she'll explode with anger when she receives a summons and realizes I'm determined to sell the house. The irony is that we'll both leave with enough money to start fresh in our own homes. She might even move in with her loved ones, and I'll go about my business. My wife, who cheated on me, is now returning her truck to the bank and trying to strike up casual conversations with me via text messages. However, I've managed to maintain a neutral and unresponsive attitude toward her, often choosing to ignore her messages. She recently messaged me about evaporative coolers at Home Depot. It reminded me of our unsuccessful attempt to buy one during a winter sale. She also inquired about when I'd return home, mentioned that we'd be living in separate rooms, and even wished me a good time at the water park tomorrow. It was a trip I'd planned to take with the kids. By the way, fellow dads, water parks seem to be a gathering spot for single moms after a divorce. Today, my ex-wife sent me an SMS saying that she'll be renting her truck, for which she'll need to pay $730 a month. Consequently, our eldest child will no longer have access to a dependable car with a mileage of 220,000 miles. I must admit that the fact that she's facing the consequences of her actions brings some satisfaction. Furthermore, I had a lengthy conversation with my sister, who shared information about the man my wife is currently involved with. I discovered that the man my wife is dating has 4 previous failed marriages. According to my sister, he has a pattern of forming attachments to women, depleting their finances, and then disappearing from their lives. Though it seems unlikely, my sister passed this information along to me. In response, I told her that if this is indeed the case, I hope he defeats my wife quickly so we can complete our divorce process. I also mentioned that I hope their relationship continues until I finish the necessary legal paperwork and extricate myself from this situation. On a related note, I recently had a conversation with my wife about this topic. She informed me of her plans to return the truck as part of her intention to refinance the house. Due to financial difficulties, she can't manage to make a cash payment to settle the truck and handle the new loan amount simultaneously. Interestingly, this aligns with my own plan, which involved moving out of our shared house. She was aware that I was searching for a new residence and had no intention of staying in a house where she was freely engaging in an extramarital affair. I informed her that I intended to transfer ownership of the house to her, but I demanded a buyout. I have various liquid assets that she has to relinquish in order to obtain my share. Despite the substantial sum, it still falls short of my required amount. The potential cost of a swift departure still seems minor. I aim to settle this matter while she remains cooperative. Experience has shown that with time and increasing physical separation, people tend to undervalue the importance of an equitable division. Even though she expressed dissatisfaction about not receiving a portion of the liquid assets, I assured her that she would have full ownership of the house and could do with it as she saw fit. Whether that meant keeping it until our children grow up or inviting her boyfriend to live there, the decision is hers to make. Nevertheless, I remain cautious and watchful. Tomorrow marks an important moment for me. I'm purchasing a new home and getting the necessary legal documents drawn up by my lawyer. Those who have known my life routine know that my ex-wife, with whom I've spent 19 years, decided to have an affair, which I discovered back in March. Initially, I attempted a futile and desperate choose me dance to salvage the relationship. But after consulting with a psychologist, I realized that my life would ultimately improve without her presence. As a result, I found a rented house conveniently located within walking distance of our current home, allowing our children the freedom to come and go as they pleased. To simplify my schedule and ensure easy pickup and drop-off of the children from school, I decided to switch work shifts. The move is set to happen tomorrow, as I've already received the keys to our new home. In addition, I've arranged for the utilities to be connected. Fortunately, I'm financially stable and can afford this new venture. I should mention that I have an appointment with a lawyer to process the divorce documents. My future ex-wife and I reached an agreement via email, and the lawyer will use this agreement as a template for the legal documents. If all goes well, we'll be able to sign everything during the meeting and then patiently wait for the required waiting period. If things progress smoothly, I expect to receive a divorce decree sometime in late June or early July. It may not be as much as I'd like, but I believe my mental well-being is worth it. Regarding my job, I still have a few restricted shares, the rights to, which will vest in the future. Fortunately, our agreement states that my future ex-wife waives any claim to these shares. If I choose to stay in my current position, these shares can be quite valuable. Given the ongoing support I receive from the company, including 30 days of leave and short-term disability benefits, I see no reason to leave. All this experience has solidified my loyalty to the employer. Thankfully, my future ex-wife has a well-paying job that surpasses the poverty line, which means I won't be obligated to pay spousal support. Additionally, with equal custody rights and my coverage of the children's medical, dental, and vision insurance costs, my alimony obligations amount to only $142 per month for less than 60 months. We are currently discussing the possibility of waiving this commitment. Looking ahead, I can say that in 5 years, once the children have grown up, I'll have accumulated enough savings to retire abroad at the age of 47 instead of working in the USA until I'm 70. Feeling trapped in my marriage, I realized that I was squandering money on extravagant houses and unnecessary material possessions that held little true value for me. In a way, living on the other side of the world from my future ex-wife has presented an unexpected advantage. While my heart may be broken at the end of this relationship, I don't want it to define me or rob me of the ability to love. I believe there's a special person out there to whom I'll eventually entrust my heart, even if it means becoming vulnerable again. Love and hope are incredibly powerful forces that should never fade, even in the face of betrayal by a cheating spouse. In such times, I find comfort in a quote I'd like to share with you. However, we do not look back for a long time. We continue to move forward, opening new doors and embracing new experiences. Our curiosity propels us onto uncharted paths. This serves as a reminder not to dwell on the past for too long, but to focus on moving forward, discovering new opportunities, and embracing the unknown. Curiosity becomes our guiding light, leading us to fresh and exciting journeys in life. Having made the decision to start anew, I'm taking steps to fulfill my wish list, and in a few hours, I'll embark on a journey abroad. Since July is dedicated to self-discovery, I've planned a trip to Thailand. As I navigate the waters of singledom again, it's crucial for me to reconnect with forgotten aspects of myself. At this stage, I'm actively seeking new experiences and adding them to my ever-expanding list. When my soon-to-be ex-wife sends me a message, I respond at my own pace, sometimes taking several days. While the divorce proceedings continue, I prioritize my own well-being and ensure the process is moving forward. Financial matters and property division have been successfully resolved, leaving only custody and alimony matters. My lawyer advised against accepting my future ex-wife's unreasonable proposal, which is unlikely to be approved by any judge. Instead, we made our own proposal. In my proposal, I emphasized that our children are now at an age where they can express their preferences regarding custody arrangements. I've also secured a residence within walking distance of my future ex-wife's home to make it convenient for the children to visit. It's worth noting that after I moved, she wasted no time in relocating her lover to a new residence. If this situation initially bothered me, I now find it somewhat comical, almost like a cliché. Regarding my trip, I must admit that someone else is joining me, a new girl. Interestingly, the cause of my sleepless nights is not the pain of my spouse's infidelity, but the 14-hour time difference. For those still facing difficulties, I offer a simple piece of advice: don't give up. Despite the challenges we encounter, it's crucial to maintain momentum and keep moving forward. After a lengthy process, I'm pleased to announce that my divorce is officially finalized. In summary, I made the tough choice to leave my ex-wife after she began an affair, signaling her desire to end our marriage. Unfortunately, the outcome regarding custody and alimony was not as favorable as I'd hoped, but I was prepared for the ideal outcome to be more of a wish than a reality. Still, I managed to negotiate with her regarding the alimony payment to secure a better future for our teenage boys. I convinced her to allocate half of the alimony toward their college savings. Considering our children are now teens, her suggestion that they spend weekends with us seemed reasonable, as they are almost adults and can make their own choices. With only a few significant events remaining, the custody agreement now requires my ex-spouse to handle the children's school transportation. However, this situation allowed me to secure a travel position at my job, which enables me to work overtime for about 15 hours a week and cover food expenses. Fortunately, this overtime doesn't affect the alimony calculation in our jurisdiction. Additionally, I made adjustments to my work insurance policy, excluding her from the participants, resulting in additional savings for me. It's possible that the insurance she receives at work may surpass what she gets in alimony. Furthermore, I recently learned about some health issues she's facing, including breast cysts, which further complicate her situation. The fact that she's dealing with potential health problems following her affair with another man might be seen as a form of poetic justice. I apologize if my words seem harsh, but I believe in speaking honestly. In light of recent events, I've taken measures to update my life insurance plan so she can't benefit from it. The other day, I encountered her personally while providing financial assistance for our child's medical needs. Surprisingly, this encounter didn't affect me emotionally. I'm moving forward, trying to live a positive life free from negative influences. My advice to those just starting on this challenging path is not to lose hope. Remember that there's light at the end of the tunnel and brighter days lie ahead. I must admit that in the initial stages, I acted disrespectfully, begging her to return and displaying a lack of confidence and composure. It even led to me taking temporary leave from work and facing other problems. However, I can confidently say that it's possible to survive. It may not be easy, but it's achievable. It seems like karma's wheels are beginning to turn. I've always believed that justice prevails and people tend to face the consequences of their actions. I recently learned that my ex-wife was terminated from her job, which ironically was at the same place where she first met her lover. This seems fitting, given her history of damaging previous marriages and engaging in inappropriate relationships with colleagues. Considering her past actions, it's possible the circumstances were viewed differently. Yes, it's true she had 2 affairs, and it turns out her partner was also married. Later, I found out she was diagnosed with breast cancer and is now undergoing treatment. Having lost her job, she's barely making ends meet. It also came to light that her older lover persuaded her to sell the house and disappeared with the money. While the children say she's in an emotional breakdown, I can't find sympathy for her. She chose this path for herself. While she slowly faces the consequences, I'm building a new relationship with a woman who values and loves me.
I'm a 28-year-old guy, and I recently discovered that my 28-year-old wife had an affair with her former boss, a 35-year-old married guy with kids. We've been married for 5 years, and we were each other's first everything since we were high school sweethearts and even grew up as neighbors. Despite both coming from broken homes, we thought we created something different than what we saw growing up. However, now I'm questioning if I was naive this whole time. I work remotely, but my wife went back to in-person work. She works in a field with few women, often feeling like her job is a boys' club. Her affair partner, who was her supervisor at the time, was supposedly one of the good ones, looking out for her at work. Recently, she got promoted to a supervisor role herself, which came with new responsibilities, including occasional business trips. Last week, she went on her first trip from Wednesday through Friday. Before she left, we shared encouraging words. On Monday, she came home early, looking overwhelmed with a red mark on her cheek. She bruises easily due to her fair skin. When I asked what happened, she just wanted a hug. After hugging her, she confessed to an incident at work that completely shattered my world. She had closeness with her former supervisor during the business trip. I couldn't comprehend it at first. It felt like a cruel joke or a revelation happening to someone else. I stayed silent during her confession, shocked and unable to say a word. Cheating is a touchy subject for me, just like it is for many people. My own family fell apart because of my dad's affair. I caught him cheating and told my mom. Unfortunately, my relationship with my dad is now strained because he blames me for breaking up the family, and he's never forgiven me. My wife witnessed the pain cheating caused in my family, comforting me when we were teens. Now, she's the one who's hurt me by doing the same thing to us. Apparently, the man's wife discovered the affair and confronted both him and my wife at their workplace. It turned into a big scene with employees and customers around. The woman insulted my wife, calling her names and even slapped her. Other employees got involved, and the woman was escorted out of the building. Later, my wife called her older sister, who scolded her and insisted she confess to me about the affair. I still couldn't find the words, but my wife pleaded with me to say something. All I managed to ask was for her to explain what happened on the trip. She shared that on the second day, she went for drinks with other team leads for team bonding. As the night progressed, it ended up being just her and her former supervisor. He made inappropriate comments, kissed her, and things escalated to closeness. I couldn't handle more details, so I stood up, telling her to stop. When she reached for my hand, I moved away, asking her not to touch me. She broke down, apologizing and begging for forgiveness, claiming it was a huge mistake fueled by drinks. Despite her repeated declarations of love, I told her she needed to leave and call her sister to pick her up. She stood up from the couch, crying even more, and tried to hug me, but I moved away again. She pleaded with me not to end things, promising to quit her job and give me full access to her phone, suggesting we do counseling. I couldn't hold it together. I told her that if she wasn't leaving the house, then I would. Without stopping to pack, I went straight for the door. She grabbed my arm, seemingly trying to stop me, and kept begging, saying this can't be the end after everything we've been through. Despite everything, leaving her behind while she was crying tore me apart. It's because I love her, more than I ever thought possible to love someone else. But she broke me, tossing away our entire life and future. I ended up at my mom's house, where I'm staying now. Somehow, I kept my composure during the drive, but when I arrived, I just cried. I don't think my mom has ever seen me cry as a teen or an adult. The only person who's ever seen me cry is my wife. I told my mom what happened because I didn't know how to keep it from her, showing up like that. She was heartbroken. She and my wife always got along, and my mom treated her like a daughter. That was their relationship. She didn't pass judgment, but said I could stay as long as needed and tried to offer some words of comfort. Since I left, my wife has been puff up my phone with calls and texts, but I haven't responded. The texts have mostly been begging me to come home, talk with her, asking where I am, and pleading not to give up on us. I feel so broken. I thought I knew what this pain was like, but experiencing it is different. I never thought my wife would do something like this. I always believed cheating meant the end of a relationship, but now I'm considering giving our relationship another chance, going to counseling together to salvage it. I keep thinking about our history, how much I love her, how we always felt like matching puzzle pieces, and how she was there when I thought I had no one. I don't know what to do or how to proceed. I'm at a loss. Update. This week has been incredibly painful. I feel like a helpless child again, witnessing my world crumble without my wife, who has always been my best friend and support. I was certain I didn't know the whole story, so yesterday I decided to reach out to the other betrayed spouse. I needed to hear her perspective for clarity, as she wouldn't have any reason to lie or withhold information. I found her Facebook account and messaged her on Messenger. She responded in less than 10 minutes and suggested a video call right away. I immediately agreed. Without saying a word, one look told me she was going through a similar hell. She mentioned that shortly after being escorted out of the workplace last Monday, she tried to contact me but couldn't find my details. One of the last things she said to my wife was a threat to tell me. As she said this, all I could think about was how my wife rushed home that day, and her sister told her that I needed to hear about the affair from her. I asked her if she knew more about what happened during the team lead trip, or if it was just a one-night stand and how she found out. What she told me confirmed my fears. The affair dates back to before the trip, with documented proof of intense emotional texts. All of this was shared with me through screen share, and it was tough to keep it together. She told me that back in January, she noticed her husband acting withdrawn and disinterested toward her. There were times she saw him texting my wife, which he brushed off as work-related. The day before the trip, she went to the job to drop something off her significant other had forgotten and found him in his office with my wife standing close together, joking and smiling. The whole atmosphere between them felt flirty. When they noticed her, they parted, and my wife's face looked panicked while her husband went over it all together. She felt certain something was going on, but didn't address it, wanting undeniable proof her husband couldn't escape from. After the trip, her significant other was more distant and dismissive. That night, she waited until he fell asleep and checked his phone, finding bosom texts between him and my wife. Before the trip, it started as emotional cheating, with the affair partner stating he couldn't focus at work whenever my wife was around. In these texts, it was clear the affair partner was the pursuer and aggressor toward my wife, but that doesn't really make a difference because she never shut down his advances. Some pre-trip texts involved the affair partner bashing his wife and going off about repeated collapses. It was just plain disgusting how he talked about her to my wife. He kept mentioning how maybe he needed a woman like my wife. There were texts from last Thursday night, with the affair partner inviting my wife to join the team for drinks, and texts the affair partner sent to my wife the following morning, revealing that they had closeness. At this point, there were no more replies from my wife after Thursday night. I didn't think it was possible for me to hurt any worse, but here I am. The other betrayed spouse said it took everything to stay calm, not wanting to wake her twin sleeping in the other room. She didn't wake her husband up or confront him immediately. She was done with him in her heart, feeling he had crossed a line he couldn't come back from. She was angrier than ever during their marriage, set on humiliating him like he had humiliated her. She faked her smiles, acted like everything was fine, and waited until Monday to expose him at work in front of peers, underlings, and customers. This confrontation had been brewing for a while. It was only a coincidence that my wife was at work that day. When the other betrayed spouse saw my wife with the affair partner and another employee, she decided to target my wife too. My wife tried unsuccessfully to get her to quiet down. The other betrayed spouse then said her husband showed no signs of remorse, only anger at her public outburst. I learned from her that the affair partner was fired the following day. After the confrontation, she also kicked him out of the house, saying one of the hardest things in her life was having to explain all this to her twins. I had an idea of what she meant because I saw my own mom have to do the same thing after my dad. She mentioned this whole ordeal revealed who her husband truly was, and despite her husband pursuing my wife, she believed my wife still had a role in the affair. As a woman, she expressed having no sympathy or respect for my wife. I assured her I didn't fault her for feeling that way, and she had every right to hold her perspective. Surprisingly, she apologized to me for her husband's involvement in the affair. I was momentarily speechless, and then apologized for my wife's part. She mentioned we were now part of a club we never wanted to be in, one our significant others forced us into. She inquired about my wife and me. I honestly admitted I didn't know what I was going to do, but clarified that I wasn't currently staying with my wife. We exchanged good wishes, and before ending the call, we shared numbers in case we wanted to talk again. Every raw emotion was heightened during our conversation. I opened up to my mom about what I learned, and she refrained from expressing judgment. However, I sensed her disappointment in my wife. Part of me feels a strange satisfaction that her partner is losing everything, his job and family, and perhaps he's suffering. Yet, I'm not proud of that feeling, as a wife is losing her husband, and kids are facing immense pain. I also harbor anger toward my wife for betraying us, breaking our vows, and jeopardizing my health. We had closeness after her return from the trip, and the post-trip texts suggest no protection was used. I realize I should reconnect with my wife regarding the information from other betrayed spouses and demand a timeline. However, I feel even more lost than when I made the original post. It feels like I'm drowning. I suspected this might be the case, that in a moment where she could have disclosed the whole truth to salvage anything, she still chose to lie to you. I'm sorry. Update. I reached out to my wife, breaking the no-contact rule after finding out about her affair with a coworker. There have been comments and messages that are hard to see, but I believe they're necessary and come from a good place. It's been a week since the discovery, and I've been trying to process everything after talking with the other betrayed spouse. Sleep has been elusive, knowing my wife, my friend since childhood, had an affair. Stepping outside, I feel like an empty shell, thinking people may secretly be laughing at me. Has anyone else felt this way? I decided to break no contact to request a timeline. The plan was to go unannounced on Sunday, giving her another chance to be truthful. Some mentioned the affair partner might be at our home. It was painful to consider that she could be defiling the home we shared for most of our adult lives, but after everything, it wasn't far-fetched. I texted the other betrayed spouse for a description of the affair partner's car and explained why I needed it. After receiving the info, I drove back and looked for the affair partner's car, but it wasn't around. I went into the house to find my wayward wife alone on the couch. She was stunned to see me, with red, puffy eyes, like she'd been crying. I hated seeing her this way and had an urge to comfort her, but I recalled how we got here in the first place. It was confusing, almost not acting to help her. My wayward wife called my name with relief and moved toward me, but I asked her to stop. She did, then said she'd been worried about me and thanked me for coming back home. I asked if the affair partner had been in the house. She said no, but I searched the house, and she followed after a while, promising that he was never here. I found nothing suggesting the affair partner had been there. I asked if she had any contact with him. She admitted he left a voicemail, but she didn't call back and blocked his number, providing proof. We sat at the dining room table to talk, and at this point, I tried not to get lost in emotion. I told her I would like her to answer my questions. She agreed and said she's glad I'm here, and we're talking again. I asked if she had quit, and she hadn't yet. But on the same day, the affair partner was fired. She was suspended for a week pending an investigation, and tomorrow she'll learn the outcome. She said the affair partner's firing was the sole reason she hadn't quit as she offered. I asked her to tell me about the affair. She said she already did, but I told her we both know there's more to the story, and now I'm giving her another chance to be honest. If I discover any lies, there would be no going back. She was quiet for a few moments, and then she nodded, revealing the extent of the affair, matching what the other betrayed spouse showed. She showed me the affair started emotionally, with some flirting at work, but she insisted they only had closeness once. While not going into every single detail the other betrayed spouse showed, she revealed the emotional affair. She didn't say anything I didn't already know, but it was like a fresh wound opened up. After hearing her confirm it, I was left in silence again, like how I was on D-Day. She asked me to please tell her what I was thinking. I asked her why she would do this, knowing my family's history. Was she unhappy in any way? She broke down crying, saying she has never been unhappy with me or our marriage, that she loves me, and our relationship is the most important thing to her. I said her actions speak louder. She said she doesn't know why she got involved in the affair, but never wanted to hurt me, and it damaging her that by the time they had closeness, she made so many mistakes and realized she was in too deep and didn't know how to pull herself out, especially when the affair partner had championed for her at work. She told me the affair was no failure on my part. It's all on her. I asked if she felt forced by the affair partner, to which she said everyone loved him, and there was a boys' club mentality, and she froze up during closeness. She kept saying sorry, and if she could take it all back, she would. My emotions were slipping, so I tried to speed it along and asked why she would have closeness with me, which she initiated. She only said she felt so disgusted and guilty that she wanted to wash it away by being with me again. I told her she didn't wash anything away. All she did was endanger me to ease her conscience. She didn't have a response. She only kept crying. I then questioned her if she ever intended to tell me. She admitted she wanted to confess but was afraid because she knew that cheating was a deal breaker for me. Her plan was to fix it by ending the affair and cutting off communication with the affair partner outside of work. She claimed she stopped texting him after they had closeness. I inquired if the affair partner wore a contraceptive, and she disclosed that closeness wasn't planned. Because she froze up, she didn't mention protection to the affair partner. She expressed deep remorse, acknowledging that she'll never forgive herself and understands my right to feel hatred. The pain she caused me and the no-contact period have deeply scared her. She pleaded with me to give our marriage another chance, but I compared her to my dad, and that hurt her deeply. Although she insisted she was nothing like him, I questioned the difference. When she tried to take my hand, I pulled away. She argued that our situation is different from my parents and begged me to believe we can overcome this given everything we've been through. I couldn't bring myself to say that. I then requested a timeline, which seemed to terrify her, but I insisted. and she agreed. I emphasized the need for both of us to get tested, and she agreed without hesitation. Struggling to keep my emotions in check, I packed a bag and some essentials. She pleaded for me to stay, willing to sleep on the couch, but I couldn't remain in the same house with her. She professed her love and apologized for everything, but I couldn't respond. When she asked where I was staying, I admitted it was with my mom. She wanted me to convey a message to my mom, but I declined, stating I couldn't be the go-between. I sensed her concern about her relationship with my mom, as she had treated her like a daughter. Despite her request for a hug, I refused and left. Now I'm assessing my options. While she revealed more truth, the reality remains unchanged. I'm uncertain about her claim that she froze up. I'm also hesitant to share the affair with others due to embarrassment. Currently, I'm taking it day by day and would appreciate any advice on how to proceed. The idea of freezing up seems unlikely to me. She still went through with it, and truthfully, they might have had closeness more than once. Doing so without protection feels uncomfortably bosom for a casual encounter. Am I mistaken? Update. I got the timeline from my wife, detailing her affair with her coworker. I've been maintaining casual contact with her. She texted about heading to a post-suspension meeting, and an hour later, she informed me of her termination. We discussed the STD test scheduled for Thursday. Last night, she FaceTimed me, and although I was hesitant to answer, she still looked the same as on Sunday. She mentioned finishing the timeline, and I told her I'd come over tomorrow. She expressed that writing the timeline was one of the hardest things she had done, second only to our current separation. She was trying not to cry, and although I would normally comfort her, I couldn't. My mom offered to accompany us for support. She wouldn't enter the house, just wait in the car, likely concerned about my drive back. I accepted her offer and drove us. My wife was waiting for me inside with a 2-page document, visibly anxious. I sat by her on the couch. It felt like D-Day all over again. I wanted her to read the timeline, and although she was taken aback, fear was evident on her face. We were usually so attuned, and her fear heightened my dread. I said I needed her to do this for me, and after a moment she did. It was crushing on D-Day when talking to other betrayed spouses, when she admitted the emotional affair, and it still was. The timeline covered from my wife being hired through D-Day, detailing how her friendship with her affair partner began. The workplace culture and how the affair partner presented himself were different. He joked with the guys, but didn't go along with nonsense, keeping his department intact. Their friendship grew, and he started venting about his home life, with her as a listening ear. He probed about her life. She told him about her mom relapsing, and as he grew bolder, she wished she'd spoken up, but was blinded by the view of him being one of the good ones at work. Co-workers mocked her for being his favorite. She didn't confide in me because I was dealing with my dad at the time, and she felt her problems were minor, so she vented to the affair partner. This began the emotional affair, and now he knew about issues I wasn't aware of. It hurt to hear because we always kept open communication. There was nothing we couldn't talk about, no matter what was going on. She was my first priority, and I would have been there for her. We were a team, a pair. The affair partner started flirting at work, exchanging texts, and she reciprocated. He hinted at a promotion for her. After the promotion, he hugged her, their first physical contact, joking that she could thank him later. During a team outing, they broke off, and he vented about other betrayed spouses and his kids. They went to his room under the pretense of celebrating her promotion. He turned on music, talked about the view, pulled her close, and started dancing. He kept saying how pretty she was. Eventually, he kissed her, and she froze up. Emotions weren't there. The affair partner groped her, and it led to closeness. She didn't peek, and he finished quickly, saying it was a hell of a celebration. She fell asleep, quietly left to her room, went into the shower, and scrubbed her body repeatedly, but still felt filthy. She didn't sleep and cried, thinking of me. The next morning, there was only one meeting, but she didn't go. The affair partner called, expressing disappointment, and suggested staying another day. She was barely replying, lied about being hungover, and he offered to cover for her at the meeting. He tossed the idea of them staying behind another day. She was afraid to tell me about what happened because she knew how cheating was a deal-breaker for me. She devised a plan to end the affair by limiting communication with her coworker to work-related matters. Returning home early, she was overwhelmed with guilt when we reunited, but she pretended that everything was normal. On Saturday morning, she initiated closeness in an attempt to erase her actions, but the regret intensified as she had been with her coworker without protection. On Monday, her coworker pulled her aside, and she suggested leaving the past behind as a mistake, but he resisted until another employee intervened. After the confrontation, she called her sister in a state of panic. My sister-in-law found out the same day I did. While there's more to the timeline, I condensed it as I read. She cried and took brief breaks to catch her breath. I wasn't holding up well either. Despite her repeated apologies and attempts to touch my hand, I withdrew from her. Needing to leave, I requested the timeline and departed. Inside my car, I broke down, and my mom, without saying a word, embraced me. I sat there crying in her arms like a little kid again. In no condition to drive, my mom drove us back. My wayward wife kept calling and texting, bombarding my mom's phone, but I assured my mom that I would handle it. When I eventually called back, she asked if I was okay, and I questioned why in the world I would be okay. She admitted I was right and apologized, acknowledging she was no better than my dad. She saw the timeline as a confrontation with herself, gaining clarity. She professed her love for me, emphasizing our journey from friends to best friends, and cherishing every moment with me. She regretted her choices at work, acknowledging they were minor compared to the pain I and other betrayed spouses experienced. She hated herself for potentially losing me and asked if I could find it within me to reconcile. She promised to spend forever showing me what our relationship means to her and to put in the work to make things right again. I couldn't respond, my right hand shaking. I only stated that I needed some space. Do I regret hearing the timeline? Not really, because I needed to know. Sometimes decision-making is challenging for me, and I might scrutinize it, but once made, I strive to stick to it. That's always been my way. I have always loved my wayward wife. We have been through a lot together, and I don't want to lose our relationship. However, I still feel broken when I think about what has happened. Individual counseling seems beneficial, as I did it for a year after my dad's affair. I also plan to pursue a polygraph and insist on a pregnancy test. Any thoughts or advice on this situation would be appreciated. Update: I found out more details after my wife shared the timeline of her affair with her coworker. Since she read her timeline, there hasn't been a peaceful moment. It hasn't been weighing heavily on me, and I still haven't slept well. I've been reading the timeline at least once every day, and with each reread, I go through a range of emotions: sadness, hurt, anger, and embarrassment. Sometimes I can't even express my feelings in words. I don't believe she was lying or altering the details. Everything aligns with what another betrayed spouse showed me. I think the timeline had a significant impact on her. While the affair is what it is, I do believe the affair partner targeted her. I'm upset that I was unaware and couldn't protect her. When we were 17, there was a troubling incident with her mom, and she sought comfort at my house. I promised to always protect her. I feel like I failed with the affair partner, not seeing his motives and relying solely on her word. On Friday night, I texted another betrayed spouse to see if we could talk. I wanted her input and to check on how she and the twins were doing. She called. Just after putting her kids to bed, she shared the challenges and her focus on the kids. She mentioned a bitter divorce in progress. The affair partner acts like the wronged party, puffing himself up. He hasn't apologized and is living at an extended stay. She changed the locks to keep him out. I inquired about the affair partner's history, past cheating, misaply of power. She understood my concern, suspecting past infidelities without proof. She mentioned an allegation 5 years ago at his previous job, reported to HR for retaliation. Nothing came of it, and the woman was viewed negatively. She ignored the signs because she was pregnant. There wasn't another allegation, and he had a great reputation. It took me a moment to process this information. I asked if he gave her a timeline, but she wasn't interested, wanting a divorce. She suggested her attorney for a consultation when I'm ready. I took the info and thanked her. We talked briefly about life post-D-Day before ending the call. I felt more anger toward the affair partner. I believe he targeted my wayward wife, but she still had an emotional affair that grew, and I just feel deeply hurt, lost, and betrayed. I really hate all of this. Yesterday, I couldn't shake off what the other betrayed spouse said. My sister-in-law called, sounding troubled. She was worried about my wayward wife, believing she wasn't doing well and hadn't been eating. She asked if I had talked to her, but I hadn't since Thursday. My wayward wife has been respecting my request for some space. I didn't like hearing this at all. The thought of my wayward wife going through this and the days without contact or seeing her have been really tough. She asked if I could talk to her, but I had already decided to visit her. On the way, I stopped at a local restaurant she likes and ordered her usual meal to go. I went straight to our home without telling her beforehand. Part of me wondered if the affair partner might be there this time, but his car wasn't around. I found my wayward wife on the couch, looking like she was going through hell. Conflicting emotions hit me. Her choices brought this on, but I also wanted to comfort her. She sat up, surprised to see me. She moved to get up, probably to hug me, but she stopped herself. I showed her the food, telling her I needed her to eat. This caught her off guard, and she said I didn't have to, but I insisted. I helped her settle at the table, got her a drink, and she started eating. I asked about the affair partner, if he's been to the house. She said no. I asked to see her phone, and she handed it over without hesitation. While she ate, I checked her phone, but there were no new messages with the affair partner, and his number was still blocked. After she finished eating, I mentioned her sister's call, which surprised her. She promised she didn't ask her to do that and respected my space request, but I said it was okay. I wasn't bothered by the call. She said I shouldn't have to rush home, but I insisted our vows matter. She started tearing up, saying she ruined us, hurt me, and betrayed me. She admitted she's angry and disappointed in herself. At this point, her words hit me deeply, and I broke down. She kept saying she didn't deserve me and tore herself apart. She said she must regret being with her, and I cut in, saying my whole life was wrecked. But I didn't regret her. I reminded her of our history, the time she saved me, and how I never wanted to be apart from her. Before D-Day, we just cried without saying another word. I told her I needed to go, and as I left, she thanked me, understanding my need for space. She's not giving up on us and plans to start individual counseling. I nodded. My first counseling session is scheduled for Monday, but I still don't know how to proceed or feel any less lost. Every imaginable emotion is wrecking me, and I feel trapped in a maze.